Oh. Oh, can you promote?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
So we do the roast.
Katie, are you ready to begin?
Yes, we are. I'm just doing a little housekeeping here.
Okay, good. Well, you do your housekeeping. I want to just take 30 seconds to promote. Everyone should have received the invitation on Monday. We are hosting Congressman Dan Goldman in our conference room.
I don't know.
One-on-one, it is open to not just board members, but members of the public. However, and it is on whatever topic an attendee wants to discuss, but the space is limited. The congressman only has a limited block of time, which opened up rather late. So we're trying to accommodate that. So if anyone is interested, by all means, check out the flyer that was sent to you, and please RSVP. It's first come, first serve. And I will tell you, if you do not get a space, we anticipate having more of these events over the summer. So this is our first shot at it. That's all.
Thank you. That was Board Chair Susan Kent. For those of you who don't know her, with a very welcome announcement. Thank you, Susan.
Great.
A couple more board members are coming in right now, but I want to welcome everyone to the May 2024 Land Use and Housing Committee meeting of Manhattan Community Board 2. My name is Katie Bordenaro. I'm co-chair, and
Hi,
here.
My name is Eugene Yu, Commissioner for Land Use.
And I'll just go around the room.
Yeah, hi, Bill Riccobono, member. Member.
Donna Raftery, member.
Michael Levine, member.
Susan Wittenberg, board member.
Rodrigo Siegel, any member?
Also, committee members online, Stella Fitzgerald. And, hi.
Sweeney.
And finally, John DeVerna. No. You say hi.
John DeVerna, public member.
Oh, thank you.
We have other community board members here today, Ryder Kessler.
Hi.
And new board members, so it's Eddie Siegel.
Hello.
And who's
Endless.
Ben? Thank you. You're just meeting today. Our main purpose of business is City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, a presentation by the Department of City Planning concerning this citywide zoning text amendment. And I believe, Andy, you want to introduce the team from the Department of City Planning to everyone? That'd be really helpful.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. It's been a while. I'm Andy Kunthu. I am the West Side team leader in the Manhattan office at the Department of City Planning. I'm joined by my colleague Chelsea Evans, who's the CB2 and CB7 planner. She's going to be presenting this evening. And also lucky to have John Manjum, who is our director of our housing division. So he'll be available to answer questions after the meeting.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome to Chelsea and John as well. Do we need to help you technologically, Chelsea?
I think I can just share my screen.
Okay. We're your presentation. Following that, you've agreed to answer questions, so we'll have that opportunity. We'll take advantage of that opportunity. But okay. I know you have a presentation all ready for us, so it'd be great if we could see it. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, let me pull it up. Okay. Are you all seeing that?
Yes, we are.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I just want to start off by saying thank you to the Land Use Committee for hosting our presentation this evening. I haven't had the chance to meet many of you, but as Andy said, my name's Chelsea Evans, and I'm a community planner covering CD2. The City of Yes for Housing Opportunity proposal is an ambitious proposal with many components, and we've tailored it to focus on the elements that are most relevant to Community District 2. So this proposal is just entering public review, and we welcome your questions at the end, but we may not have all of the answers just yet. So we'd love to receive any questions we can't answer tonight or additional questions that come up in writing, and we'll work on getting you responses as soon as possible. So the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is a citywide plan that will encourage incremental housing growth over a wide geography by removing barriers to housing production. And we'll walk through citywide changes and explain how you can expect this proposal to apply in your neighborhood. And please feel free to stop me if at any point if you don't understand a word or term used. While I know the committee is aware of this fact, I think it's important to underline the obvious before we get into details of this proposal. New York City faces a severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low, only 1.4%. That's far below a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with housing options. In Manhattan, the vacancy rate is only 2.33%, and that's down from 10% in 2021. Because our housing demand is greater than our housing supply, New Yorkers are experiencing very high housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. And not having enough homes has direct human consequences. One of the most prominent examples of that is homelessness. Each night of 2023, over 92,000 homeless New Yorkers slept in shelters. So the chart you see on this slide shows housing production over time in New York City. Most of New York City's housing was created in the first half of the 20th century. And since that time, housing production has fallen dramatically. And while zoning is just one piece of the puzzle, this is in part because zoning has become increasingly restrictive since 1961. And at that same time, demand for housing has increased. So this text amendment is the biggest pro-housing change DCP has ever undertaken, and it would touch the zoning for every single part of the city. So tonight we're going to walk through the proposal in general, since it will affect every part of the city, but again, we're going to focus on what is most relevant to CD2. So we'll start with the low density proposal, and then we'll talk about medium and high density proposals. And finally, across the city, there are a range of other citywide proposals, including enabling the conversion of non-residential buildings to housing, allowing more small and shared apartments, and allowing for infill on large residential campuses. So first, we'll briefly touch on the changes we're proposing in the low density districts in the outer boroughs. While this doesn't apply directly to CD2, it is important to understand that this proposal really does aim to create a little more housing everywhere in the city. And it's also important to know this since CB2 is being asked to vote on the entire proposal. Inclusionary zoning rules have made it virtually impossible to build housing in many low density neighborhoods. And it's placing additional pressure on high density parts of the city to produce more housing. The town center proposal aims to create more missing middle housing in low density areas. Missing middle refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle income residents, a once common type of housing that's not often built in the city anymore. This proposal streamlines zoning rules, including restrictive limits on floor area and height, so that it is once again feasible to build 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor. Our second proposal for missing middle housing is transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development would allow for low-rise buildings that are approximately 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, on sites that are near transit and meet specific criteria. You can see that criteria outlined on the slide. In the rest of the low-density areas, the proposal aims to give homeowners more flexibility. Under this proposal, a 1 or 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. These small units would provide important housing options for small households, like a young person moving into their own place for the first time, or an elderly resident who wants to age in place. Because of their small size, they also serve different income levels than a large single-family home. Next, we'll discuss the medium and high density proposals in detail. So there are 2 key elements to the proposals in medium and high density districts. The cornerstone is really the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP, proposal, which will allow buildings to add at least 20% more affordable or more housing if the additional homes are permanently affordable housing. And that includes supportive housing. So it will replace the voluntary inclusionary housing program. And then we're also proposing updates to the mandatory inclusionary housing program, or MIH. Here we want to equalize MIH FARs for districts where UAP FAR is higher. And we're proposing other changes that we'll talk about in a little more detail that allow, for example, allowing the deep affordability option, or MIH option 3, to be a standalone option for developers. UAP is modeled after current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. So before we begin digging into what this map is showing on the slide, I just want to caveat that this map only shows underlying zoning districts, and we'll discuss special districts in more detail later in the presentation. So this map shows where UAP will broadly apply in the city, which is generally everywhere that the underlying zoning is a medium or high density district, and that's R6 to R10 districts. And through the UAP framework, all forms of affordable or supportive housing would be able to take advantage of the higher FARs already provided to affordable senior housing in these districts. Right now, most zoning districts allow affordable senior housing to be about 20% bigger than other buildings. However, there are a few districts that don't have a senior housing preference today. And in the areas where that's not currently the case, the proposal would create new FARs to enable the growth of affordable and supportive housing in every neighborhood. The proposal would also make sure that zoning provides room to build the extra affordable housing required through UAP, so there would be limited height increases where it is necessary to make enough room for these affordable homes. So next I'm going to walk you through how UAP would apply in a couple of different scenarios. Yep.
So could you just repeat that comment about limited height? I want to make sure I understood what you meant.
Yeah, so the proposal wants to make sure that zoning provides room to build the extra affordable housing required through UAP. So some districts see limited height increases where it's necessary to make enough room for the affordable homes.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to walk through a couple of different scenarios for UAP. So here's an example of how UAP would function in the construction of new mixed income housing. Let's say a developer has a vacant site in an R6 district and plans to build a mixed income building that includes market rate and affordable units. The yellow on this drawing just shows the additional floor area a developer can build if they include affordable housing. In reality, the affordable housing would be distributed throughout the building. But today they'd get 3 FAR, regardless of whether they're developing market rate or affordable. And that would allow them to build about 35 units. Under UAP, they'd get 3.9 FAR, but note that the extra FAR could only be used for affordable housing. And if it is, they can build about 10 to 12 more affordable units. This building would also be allowed to be 30 feet taller than it would be today. So 10 to 12 units might not sound like a lot, but this functioning at a citywide scale, if every project has a few more affordable units, we can add a significant amount of affordable housing citywide. And now let's look at another example where we have a, yep.
Did you say that it could be 30 feet taller or 10 feet taller? And there's a discrepancy between the slide and what you said it.
Yeah, the slide is correct. I think Chelsea was using an older script, so
right.
what's on the screen is correct.
Yeah.
For this particular zoning district.
And is the affordable housing only in the yellow area or is it distributed throughout?
Distributed throughout.
Just want to make sure I heard that correct.
Yep, distributed throughout.
Okay, good.
So here's an example of UAP in new construction of 100% affordable housing. So for example, where we have a city-owned site in an R8B district, today R8B districts do not have a preferential FAR for senior housing. So this site is limited to 47 units, no matter what kind of housing they're providing. And we're proposing in R8B districts and all other districts with no existing senior housing preference or a very small senior housing preference that they receive a 20% bump for affordable housing. And so in an R8B district, this means 4.8 FAR for affordable housing. And then in this example, that translates to an additional 9 to 10 permanently affordable homes. We also want to make sure that every medium and high density zoning district has a preference for affordable housing in order to encourage incremental affordable housing growth throughout the entire city. We want to make sure that buildings can actually fit this affordable housing, so we're proposing height increases so that the affordable FARs can actually be realized. And the table you see here shows the proposed adjustments to both the basic and UAP FARs, as well as the height limits to accommodate the additional UAP FAR. Like the last table, here you can see the height adjustments we're proposing for R9 through R12 districts. And in the interest of time, we won't go through these right now, but we've provided the slides to Mark and the chairs of the committee, so you can review them in greater detail. And I just want to show you an illustrative example quickly of how UAP will impact the forum. So on the left, you see a proposed development without UAP, and on the right, the additional 20% of the FAR included in the building with permanently affordable housing. As we mentioned in the proposal overview, UAP will replace voluntary inclusionary housing, including inclusionary housing designated areas in R10 districts and equivalents. So like UAP, these are optional zoning tools to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. And as you can see on the map, VIH covers a relatively limited part of the city. So UAP will extend a preference for affordable housing citywide to all medium and high density zoning districts. UAP also has other benefits compared to VIH, including the lower AMI, which is 60% AMI for UAP, and it allows for income averaging to provide housing at a wider range of incomes rather than the narrow 80% AMI band that we have with VIH. So VIH is an optional affordable housing tool, which is available in areas of CD2. Today, VIH covers only 13% of medium and high density areas. And like I mentioned before, VIH AMIs are at 80%, and that's about $101,000 for a family of 3. While UAP will replace voluntary inclusionary housing, achieve deeper affordability and allow for income averaging, we're also going to maintain mandatory inclusionary housing, so that will continue to be mapped, and the existing affordability requirements for MIH will remain in place. So practically, this means that there could be a mix of homes at different income levels, and the table on the slide shows an example of what that mix could look like.
Could you just hold this for a minute so we?
Yeah.
I see. Thank you. Is everyone else okay to move on? Okay.
The proposal will also make updates to mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH. So first, this proposal will allow for MIH option 3 to be a standalone option. MIH option 3 requires that there be a 20% set aside at an average of 40% AMI. Our proposal will equalize MIH FARs for districts where UAP FAR is higher. So, for example, in an R6A district, the MIH FAR will change from 3.6 to 3.9. And it's important to note that the options would remain in place, meaning that the same percentage of affordability will continue to be required. And then finally, we're proposing to streamline rules for 100% affordable projects. Some projects around the city, including in Manhattan CB2, have had administrative difficulty complying with IH requirements. And so under this new regime, 100% affordable projects would not be subject to overlapping and conflicting requirements in the zoning text. The proposal would exempt 100% affordable home ownership projects from rules that prevent them from penciling out. The current MIH program is also incompatible with tools that facilitate affordable home ownership. And returning to our scenarios, I'll walk through an example of how this proposal affects a mandatory inclusionary housing area. So let's say there's a site in an R7A district. It was recently rezoned and is subject to MIH. The current maximum MIH FAR is 4.6 FAR, which on this site results in about 54 units. And depending on the MIH area, 25 to 30% of the units would be required to be affordable. Based on the UAP FAR in our 7A districts, which is 5.0, the MIH FAR will also be raised to 5, but the 25 to 30% affordability requirement will remain in place. And so in this scenario, that would mean approximately 59 total units would be created, and 25% of which would be permanently, or 25 to 30% of which would be permanently affordable. And let's jump into the citywide proposals. So first, this proposal includes the creation of new zoning districts above 12 FAR. The maximum FAR for R11 and R12 districts will be 15 and 18 FAR respectively. These zoning districts can only be mapped with mandatory inclusionary housing. And in addition, this proposal would also create 2 new medium density districts, R62 and R6D. The new districts being proposed are intended to fill the gap in the existing spectrum of zoning districts. It's also important to note that no mapping actions are part of the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, meaning a separate action would be required to map these districts if appropriate locations are identified in the future.
Does that apply to CB2?
These districts haven't been mapped yet. It would require a mapping action.
Is that remapping part of the City of Yes?
It's not a part of the proposal, no.
Okay.
Not to worry. Nah.
Now,
So this proposal would also make it easier to add contextual infill to campuses and other irregular or challenged sites. Previous campus development often took place under tower in the park style regulations called height factor. And although DCP has developed a more recent set of regulations for contextual buildings that have height limits and result in better designs, some sites like NYCHA campuses can't access those new rules. So the proposed changes would allow height limited infill on sites that would otherwise be forced to develop tall, skinny buildings or nothing at all. And a variety of other changes would address barriers faced by irregular or challenged sites, and these include making more sites eligible for contextual envelopes and eliminating the outdated sliver law in favor of height limited contextual envelopes. And then just to briefly discuss the campus info rules. So campuses are defined as sites 1.5 acres or larger, or sites that have full control of the block. In medium and high density areas, the proposal would do 2 things. First, it would replace mixing rules that prevent zoning lots developed with height factor buildings from adding contextual height limited buildings. And second, it would align the distance between building rules with existing multiple dwelling law, or with the existing multiple dwelling law. The next proposal would remove outdated rules to allow for more small and shared apartments. What this means is allowing buildings with only simple no-frills studios, as well as homes with private bedrooms, but shared kitchens or other common facilities. These building types have historically played an important role in New York's housing landscape, especially for young working New Yorkers who need a place to stay while they get their feet under them. New, small, and shared apartments can provide important housing choices for New Yorkers, especially marginally housed New Yorkers, and people who prefer to live alone but cannot afford to do so. And today, many people are being forced into living situations that they don't want, and in some cases, that includes doubling up in an overcrowded unit. So these rules are meant to address that.
Does that talk about bathrooms in those units?
John might be.
That
was my question
too. John Mangan here from Housing Division. For shared apartment, for the shared apartments, which we've been working on with HPD over the last 5 or so years, you would individually lease your bedroom. More typically, you would share kitchens and other common facilities. We are not proposing to limit shared bathrooms as well, as long as it's within a certain number of units, bedrooms per bathroom.
So it is communal bathrooms.
It would be permitted under the zoning. We haven't actually seen that form of housing in other places yet, though. So we don't expect to see much of that.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Thank you.
Yeah, I lived in a tenement on the Lower East Side, talking about outdated, and it had a shared bathroom in the hallway. That was considered like primitive.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the zoning changes for shared housing. Our current zoning does not have a clear path for building shared housing, so housing opportunity would create clear rules and make the process less complex to enable a fuller range of shared housing options. These updated rules would make it possible to build shared housing in any multifamily zoning district. The proposal would also enable the development of new construction shared housing, including affordable shared housing. So, and Housing Opportunity is also seeking to legalize existing unregulated shared housing. In addition to the small and shared housing modifications, we are also proposing some zoning changes to enable more conversions. First, we'll change the eligible geography from business districts in Manhattan and limited areas in Queens and Brooklyn to the entire city. And this will allow for the conversion of buildings beyond just large offices like schools or former religious buildings. And second, we'll allow more recent buildings to have access to our more flexible reuse regulations. So today, a building must be built prior to 1961 or 1977, depending on what part of the city it's in, to use the more flexible conversion rules. And we'll move this cutoff date up to 1990, allowing underused buildings from the 70s and 80s to convert into housing. And finally, our current adaptive reuse regulations only apply when a non-residential building is converting into traditional apartments, but office floor plates, for example, may work better for a kind of housing like shared housing or dorms. So we'll change our adaptive reuse regulations so that they can be used to convert into any type of housing, including supportive housing, shared housing, or dorms. Our next citywide proposal seeks to expand the existing Landmark Transfer of Development Rights program. The Landmark TDR program was created in the 1960s to relieve the financial burden on designated landmarks, which are subject to maintenance requirements and limited in their ability to redevelop or add new buildings to the lot. It would also allow landmarks to transfer development rights to more sites, including other zoning lots on the same zoning block as the landmark, or immediately across the street or an intersection from the block. The proposal would streamline the approval process to a certification when no bulk modifications are necessary to accommodate the TDRs on the receiving site, or an authorization when an applicant is seeking bulk modifications. So currently the program is not available for landmarks in historic districts or low density R1 through R5 zoning districts. So this proposal would expand the applicability of the Landmark TDR program to those areas. And these expansions of the Landmark TDR program would help generate revenue to maintain landmarks while also unlocking additional housing opportunities.
Chelsea, could you clarify, this is just for individual landmarks, correct? It's not for buildings in a landmark district. It's limited to individual landmark buildings.
One building at a time.
One building at a time.
That's right. Only individual landmarks, same as today.
Thank you.
And finally, this text amendment would eliminate required parking minimums in new buildings citywide. So these rules already exist in most of Manhattan, including Community District 2. Mandated parking is extremely expensive to provide, and parking mandates drive up rents and prevent new housing from being built. It's also important to note that parking will still be allowed, and projects can add the amount of parking that they believe to be appropriate at their location. Okay, so the last topic of the evening is special districts. I'll give you an overview of special districts. Then you all can decide if we want to delve into more detail about the specific Community District 2 districts. But New York City has a diverse array of special districts that have been put in place to further neighborhood planning goals. As a general approach, the current proposal carries through any relevant changes to the special district to ensure these areas also have appropriate housing opportunities. The current proposals may be modified where the changes directly conflict with a special district's goals. That's important to keep in mind. But a lot of special districts were written before there were analogous rules for underlying districts. So, for example, lot coverage regulations. So the goal is to eliminate redundant text in the special district and align it with the broader underlying district rules to create a more consistent framework. In some instances, the rules for the underlying district will be different from the older special districts rules. So in CDs, with all that in mind, this is an overview of how special districts are proposed to be updated in CD2. We want to align special districts with the UAP framework by first replacing inclusionary housing programs with universal affordability preference program and making sure that the FAR increase of 20% for UAP is generally applied across the board within special districts. And also update the height limits to ensure that the additional FAR can be accommodated everywhere. And to my earlier point about many special districts rules being ahead of their time, we're also proposing to update some regulations from the special districts to underlying zoning districts. So the proposal includes eliminating redundant bulk regulations to reference underlying districts like yard, lot coverage, street wall, etc., as well as eliminating rules that conflict with citywide proposals. Minimum dwelling unit size is an example. The next slides that I have are broken out by special district, and they include a lot of detail. I can show you the first one. So if you would like me to walk through them, I can. But if you would prefer to just start with questions from the main proposal, that's also okay too. If you want to take some more time to look at these, we provided you with the presentation. So whatever your preference is, I'm happy to do.
I'm just taking a minute to see what was in.
What did you say?
Maybe
Okay,
could we go through the Hudson Square and maybe the Soho, those two?
Yep. So here's the special Hudson Square district changes. The first thing is Housing Opportunity is proposing to eliminate this bespoke IH or inclusionary housing provisions to align them with UAP. For height and setback, it would maintain the 290-foot height limit on wide streets, so that's not changing, but it would remove redundant provisions and it aligns them with the R10A C64A regulations. Other regulations, it would be maintaining some special rules, but generally it's aligning with the new underlying regulations for street wall, permitted recesses, permitted obstructions, and then court and rear yard regulations.
Do you have any slides that would illustrate the change?
I don't know, but we can work on something for you all.
thank you.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Chelsea, David has a question.
Yep.
Can you just, 2A, all buildings regardless of use had to comply with modified R10A bulk rules. New buildings must comply. I understand the new buildings, but we're asking all buildings, you're trying to get them into compliance?
Or is that old regulations and
No,
what?
yeah, this refers to old regulations and then the new regulations.
Generally align with new underlying conditions for street.
I have a question.
Okay.
Michael has a question. Go ahead.
Real quick, did I miss something here? Are there minimum room sizes, requirements here? Or are they waived in favor of the UAP, designations? I didn't hear anything about room size. Is there a minimum?
Hi, Michael. So in the zoning today is dwelling unit factor, which is a minimum average unit size. So if you're building a new development, you're maxing out the FAR potential on the site. Typically, you have to balance out smaller units with larger units. Over the years, that's ended up being largely redundant with regulations elsewhere, like housing maintenance code, building code, and other. We're proposing to re-legalize developments that are, say, full of studio apartments, for instance. It's a style of housing that used to work well as kind of a foothold in the city typically for younger folks coming to the city for the first time. And, you know, we don't see any reason to limit the potential to build those types of housing again. Our analysis shows that, you know, it'll present marginal opportunities. People will not, you know, leap at the opportunity, but it will provide some opportunities for a different typology for some marginal projects.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Carter has a question.
So I had a question, you know, this sounds very good, but we used to have a lot of this type of housing within our community board. Many of our luxury hotels are actually what you described as the small units. Marlton Hotel, Jane Hotel, White House Hotel is being converted as we speak, 218 Bowery. It used to be 312 Bowery as well. I mean, there's so many of these units. What's to prevent this in the future from, again, being used for other purposes? You know, especially the studio apartment buildings. My great aunt lived in one near Union Square, you know, many, many years ago, before I was born. But you know, so we have all these stories, but everything is now luxury. And that is the drive in our community. And we also lose a tremendous amount of housing to conversions, downward conversions. The building I used to live in was 9 units. It's now a single family home. And so what's to prevent this in the future from happening again, people combining these units? And
You are correct that the tendency in your part of town for new construction tends to be larger units that sell for a lot of money. One of the obstacles to creating smaller units, which is a typology that, you know, we actually have a pretty severe dearth of smaller units in the city right now. If you go back to 1950s, 1960s, that average household size was well above 3. Towards 3.5. Today, you know, households are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so there's not that typology to serve, you know, 1-person households, 2-person households. And so what we see is multiple people joining together as roommates and going and putting pressure on family-sized units in other parts of the city. So we want to get out of the way in the zoning to creating that typology. We've seen that in other jurisdictions, you know, as well. Smaller units or shared units that serve as a great like type of housing for recent college graduates or older, you know, empty nesters, or, you know, not too far away from CB2 from marginally housed people. This is a type of housing that exists informally in many parts of, for instance, Chinatown. And so we're trying to provide a pathway, a formal legal pathway to create this to satisfy those niches, underserved niches of the housing market today, especially in central locations. So that's the goal here.
I guess I bring it up because a lot of this is sort of utilized some of the, so I'll give an example of something. There's a high-end building with units that are month to month, right? So they're circumventing sort of the Airbnb type things. But what's to stop that from, you know, as people build these, from really circumventing the purpose. And I say that because I don't hear anything that keeps this going in our community, you know, through time. Because it seems that everything that's built here quickly, even with good intentions, becomes unaffordable not many years later, meaning, you know, it could be a decade later, 2 decades, but still transitions right on out of what the original intent was.
You're right. That's the housing shortage at work right there. You know, in the case of severe housing shortage, and I would say that your part of the city is up there, parts of the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, because it's really hard to build housing in those areas, and because the demand is off the charts. You see lots of unit combinations, things like that, that actually reduce the overall amount of housing. We can share some of our background analysis on numbers of housing units in different neighborhood tabulation areas across the city. And believe it or not, some are actually losing housing. And it comes from that dynamic you're describing. If there's not enough housing and like somebody with a lot of money wants more housing in certain neighborhoods of the city, they have to just like out and out take it away from somebody else through unit combination or redevelopment or taking that townhouse back from 9 units to 1. And so, you know, the enabling small units is just part of the full suite of proposals that Chelsea presented today. When you can actually create housing in these places, at these areas where demand is off the charts, then things like unit combinations can just become like background noise. Sure, if somebody can do it, that's fine, but you've created 10 units for every unit you lose through a unit combination. And that's a typical, somewhat more healthy dynamic we see in neighborhoods outside of the ones that I just mentioned. So it's part of a complete breakfast here. It's not, you know, a standalone proposal.
The Soho no.
I think we've exhausted, have we exhausted the questions on this slide? Okay, thank you. Yes, can we see the next slide, Chuck? Thank you.
Okay. Yep. So there's not a lot of changes to Soho NoHo, but what's staying the same is the bespoke FAR and height and setback regulations that apply rather than the standard UAP framework. For density regulations, we would be proposing to align it with the City of Yes proposal, and that would mean eliminating the dwelling unit factor. We're also proposing to eliminate the requirement that all new buildings be developed or enlarged pursuant to quality housing standards, and that's because quality housing is becoming the new baseline citywide. For rear yard regulations, we would be eliminating rear yards on shallow lots and rear yard equivalent regs to align with the new underlying. And then we're also eliminating historic district base height lineup allowance, dormer provisions, and then a reduced minimum distance between window provisions, since those are becoming the new standard citywide.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway here is that the things that are being taken out or eliminated from the special Soho NoHo district are just going somewhere else in the zoning resolution. So today in Soho NoHo, this was actually like something we rolled out that we piloted in Soho NoHo, the base height lineup provision. So for example, if you're a building located in a historic district or you're a landmark, you can go lower or higher than your minimum or maximum base height as of right to align with your neighboring building. And those are meant to create, you know, consistency in building forms across historic districts. That's being eliminated from Soho NoHo because we're rolling that out to all historic districts in the city.
Clear to you?
It's basically no change is what you're saying.
Yeah, so Soho NoHo, we really took a very light touch. So, you know, there are bespoke FARs, heights for all of the underlying zoning districts within the special Soho NoHo mixed use district. And those we did not change.
Have you considered changing the 17D designation to residential?
John?
No, that wasn't part of the proposal
I
here.
did not know you were gonna say that.
Could we actually get an illustration of that base height lineup allowance and how it doesn't change?
We can, yeah, we can show you exactly where in the text that provision is going.
Visual of that, a visual.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
I had another question, for the Hudson Square, which actually I meant to ask under that one. One of the issues that we've seen there is the balance in what's being developed seems to be skewing a bit more towards commercial development, office building construction. Is there anything that in this is going to help tip the balance to the construction of housing as opposed to commercial office buildings? And, for example, right now at 76 Varick, we have an empty lot that was originally slated to be housing and is now they're looking to develop it as a commercial office building. It's also gonna have a school in the basement, on the lower floors. But the incentivization is really an important component for us as well, because of where we're located. How is the city of Yes going to help with that, or some of those changes that you had up on the slide going to help tip that balance? We know, and I bring this up because we know many of the rezonings do not result in what the city had desired through changing conditions, that happen over time. So is there anything here that's going to put the thumb on the scale towards housing in the districts for us? We only have a few areas where really you can build big buildings with the underlying zoning. So, how is that going to come out if this were to pass?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, and we can get you a fuller answer to this after, because I'm not an expert on Special Hudson Square, but I believe the inclusionary housing provisions that are there today mirror what the program looks like for R10 districts citywide, which is it sort of artificially lowers the as of right FAR to 9, and then you can get up to 12 with a formula. So that is being taken out and being replaced with the standard UAP framework. So an R10 or R10 equivalent districts, which is what all of Hudson Square is, you would get 10 market rate FAR for residential, and then on top of that 12 FAR for the UAP. So that difference between 10 and 12 FAR would need to be affordable. I actually did a sort of look back on the Special Hudson Square district a couple of years ago. And you're absolutely right. Like the balance is definitely tilted more towards commercial development than what was anticipated back in 2011, 2012, when the rezoning went through. But we also looked at the number of affordable units that came online as a result of that rezoning and through the IH program. And we actually got very few developers actually took advantage of the IH program. So, I think our goal here in applying the more standard UAP framework for R10 is that maybe, that sweetens the deal a little bit for your standard developer to maybe produce that extra 2 FAR of affordable.
But there's nothing that would help encourage when somebody is trying to make the choice over how to develop their property between commercial and residential. There's not anything that's going to sweeten the decision to lean towards residential.
Not fundamentally. I'd say, you know, Andy, I agree with everything he said. But given that the goals of the special district really were to ensure a strong commercial component in development in the future,
No, not commercial, residential.
changing those, but you know, as expressed through things like the preservation requirements and things like that. Changing that is something that would probably be more appropriate for a special Hudson district specific set of changes. Through the city, through something like a citywide, we actually want to be careful that we are not interfering with essential planning goals that are embedded in special districts, since that's something that's more appropriate for a neighborhood-based consideration. And so we did not attempt to alter the orientation of the special district through the citywide. But if that's something that CB2 feedback that you're giving us, that's something that we can definitely convey within city planning.
Yeah, I guess I just bring that up because boutique office buildings seem to be a big interest in our community, and you can see that on. I know Andy's familiar with the choice to build an office building on Bowery and 4th Street, as opposed to waiting for the rezoning to address housing. I mean, this is just happening everywhere here. So if the goal is housing, it seems to be an issue in Lower Manhattan. We certainly have a lot of vacant office buildings in close proximity to our district.
Right. No, I'll tell you, we are encouraged by the recent action at the state level for the renewed tax benefit for new construction mixed income housing, but also something new, you know, the tax benefit for affordable housing and conversions as well. And so we are hopeful that we'll see more housing, both through new development and through conversions supported finally at long last by state laws as well. Whereas over the period you've been talking about, state support has been spotty at best.
I think Frederica has a question.
John, did I misunderstand you? My recollection is when we went through the Hudson Square rezoning, that all of the sweeteners, all of the concessions were to encourage people to take these manufacturing buildings and move them residential, not commercial. It was kind of a failure that they went the commercial route. Yeah.
Well, there's like the preservation requirement, commercial, non-residential use preservation requirements as well, which were intended to put the brakes on that. And changing things like that would have represented probably a more dramatic change to special districts than we were trying to accomplish through a citywide.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. What are the chances that this initiative will inadvertently produce luxury housing as opposed to affordable housing? That's my first question. And my second question is, I'd like to understand if these changes in the rules will actually produce any new sites for us.
Right.
For affordable housing.
Those are great questions. First off, I would say that in medium and high density districts, the name of the game is your market rate housing, your market rate floor area cap remains where it is today. What UAP does is it floats affordable and supportive FARs higher. So we're not taking anything away from anybody. If you can get X amount of market rate today, you can get X amount of market rate in the future. However, if you want to use these proposals in medium and high density districts to build more, go ahead. We welcome that, of course, but it has to be permanently affordable housing at 60% AMI. So yeah, after these proposals, if they're enacted, we expect them to facilitate the full range of housing types, you know, from affordable housing at very low AMIs, you know, 30% through income averaging, for instance, all the way up to market rate units that, you know, where the sky's the limit and in terms of what the rents are. But that's possible today as well with the market rate. So we're not taking market rate potential away from anybody. We're just trying to layer on top of it affordable and supportive opportunities across all medium and high density districts.
But in our district, market rate housing is luxury market rate. So
Right.
that's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
there's
and
nothing that zoning can do other than the affordability requirements that I mentioned to you know, mandate particular rents in new market rate housing. But, you know, as with the answer to, I think, Carter's question as well, what you're seeing with housing costs in Lower Manhattan, that's a product, that's the housing shortage in work, at work. You know, with vacancy rates what they are today, people don't have options. Landlords know that, and can, you know, charge ridiculous rents for their apartments, or, you know, for new construction home ownership as well. If we accomplish the goals of this proposal, and I don't know if Chelsea mentioned the potential range of units on the margin, we expect this to create anywhere from 60 to 110,000 additional units beyond what would already be created in the background condition. We think that will provide meaningful housing opportunities for people who don't have them today, and will, like, honestly change the feel of the housing market. That's enough to, like, you know, just make things seem a little less soul crushing out there for people who are looking for new housing.
That's citywide, John.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And the
But-
new sites, it doesn't really produce any new sites.
We do, so citywide, we certainly do expect it to create new opportunities for housing. So for instance, Chelsea presented some of the lower density districts where today there is not a realistic opportunity to, for instance, redevelop a single story taxpayer into that iconic building form, which is, you know, 3 or 4 stories of residential above a commercial ground floor. We'll create opportunities like that throughout the city. Same thing in medium and high density districts, in conjunction with a tax benefit. Sites that may not pencil out today will provide a little more housing opportunity there in conjunction with a tax benefit in ways that will render sites newly feasible. I don't want to undersell the conversions piece. We are expanding our adaptive reuse regs to a much later cutoff date, from 61 in your community board all the way to 90. We're enabling conversion to a fuller range of housing types. And then in conjunction with a tax benefit, we expect to see more conversions happening as well. The nature of the environmental review here, though, was citywide. Obviously, we can't go site by site when we're doing a citywide proposal. So in turn, I'm not prepared to answer any questions about specific sites in CB2. I do think we will create sites on the margin, but it's not like the environmental review for Soho NoHo, for instance, where we really did go site by site to try to analyze the potential for something happening there.
John, Michael has a question, but I have one first. And what is the citywide housing deficit right now?
You know, it's a very dynamic system. And so there's no science to determining how many units we need. That said, when the mayor announced a moonshot goal of 500,000 units over 10 years, that was a good ballpark estimate of how many units we would need to get to a healthy vacancy rate, where landlords don't have all the power, where tenants have meaningful housing opportunities, and things are, like I said, just a little less soul crushing out there. But, you know,
It's 20% of the way.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so this is probably the biggest initiative of several to try to hit that moonshot goal. Here we're expecting, you know, up to 110,000 of units in addition to background conditions over the next 15 years. So we've been producing about 20,000 units a year in recent years. If we have that, and now we have sort of state law changes at our back, and if we have these zoning changes as well, in conjunction with some of the neighborhood planning efforts that are going on around the city and places like, you know, Crown Heights or Long Island City or Jamaica, we're hopeful that we can create significantly more housing than we would in the absence of these initiatives, in a way that you can feel.
Okay, I think Michael has a question.
Yeah, my question is a little bit of a sidebar question. What has the reaction of the development community been to this proposal? A lot of what we're talking about here now is incentives for new development. Has the development community indicated that they would be willing to use the options available to them now? I'm curious to know if this has been presented to developers and what their reaction has been.
Oh golly, yeah, we've had probably I would say 150 meetings over the last year with the full range of stakeholders. You know, everybody from housing advocates to council members and their staff to builders associations. We were just meeting with the Staten Island Builders Association yesterday to talk through some of the issues that they face there. And so, you know, we have heard encouraging things from back to that town center, you know, that iconic building form of 3-4 stories of residential above a commercial ground floor in low density districts. We did hear some folks say like, oh man, if this makes so much sense, if you pass it, I will redevelop sites that I own like tomorrow. And so it's always great to hear that people, you know, think that these can work to create new housing. You know, I don't know that we had a, I don't know if you saw the New York Housing Conference letter, about 180 affordable housing developers and housing advocates and other groups signed a letter of support for these initiatives, even before we officially referred them into public review. So I think that that's a great place to start to get a sense of the development community that we're trying to support. I also appreciate, we've met with, you know, Village Preservation, for instance. I've met with Historic Districts Council a few times, met with MAS and their planning council, and was just very gratified to see appreciation from that community, which typically is very skeptical of what we're up to, given the fact that we truly are doing citywide initiatives here, a little bit of housing everywhere in a comprehensive citywide way. I don't know if you saw Elizabeth Goldstein from MAS, her op-ed in support as well. So we've met with the full range of folks, and I think feedback has been largely encouraging so far. Of course, there are dissenters. You know, I've had a few rough meetings here and there, but for the most part, feedback has been encouraging, including from the development community.
Thank you.
Okay,
It was good news.
okay, I think, I don't know if Chelsea's really finished. Maybe we should we've given Chelsea a little recess here, but I don't know if you're.
Also the hand up.
Yeah, well.
I just had a
make sure that Chelsea said everything that she wants to say.
I just have a conclusion slide. So,
Okay.
and then we have a timeline slide here. So
thank you, Carter.
This just describes the 60-day CB review. And then we close out with a city council vote, aiming for the end of this year.
Okay. Okay. You did have something more to say. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, so are there, well, since this is a regular meeting, I want to make sure that all the committee members and other members of the community board have asked their questions. Andrew, I see your hand up, but we have to go through make sure everyone has a chance. Wants to. Okay. You okay, first, Eddie?
Hey, Eddie, new incoming community board member.
To move closer to the.
Oh,
sorry.
Hi, my name is Eddie. I'm a new incoming community board member. I was wondering, you had given some of these projections on units you might expect to get out of this. Do you have a sense of where amongst, say, broadly the boroughs you think that will be distributed?
Yes, we do have an environmental review, the draft environmental impact statement that actually shows projected numbers of units. It's in a range because, you know, nobody has a crystal ball. We can't see in any absolute sense the future, but it presents a range of units for each neighborhood tabulation area. And there are 197 neighborhood tabulation areas with residential uses across the city. So it's an even smaller geography than community districts. And we have a projections for each of them in our environmental review. We can share that with you specifically. I don't know if we can drop it in the chat now, but we can follow up with that.
Yeah, I can get the link and put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, did you have a question?
Sure. I don't know, I guess it's more of a compliment, but I can turn it into a question. Like New York City maintains redlining through FAR and through zoning. So this is a great first step. Do you potentially have new next steps, or is this been so hard that you just are so focused and excited to get this one done?
Thanks for that softball question. I do want to emphasize that basically every component you've seen today grows out of where we live, which was our HUD mandated fair housing reporting that HPD led back in 2020. And that was an effort with hundreds of community organizations, hundreds of meetings across the city. And I think the crux of that was at the time was the deputy mayor, then Deputy Mayor Bean, convened the agencies, the relevant agencies, HPD, DCP, Parks, whoever, and really pushed us to say, okay, what are the things that we as a city can do to affirmatively further fair housing? What are the biggest moves that we can make? And I remember at the time, this is chapter 6 of Where We Live, if you want to take a look. I remember at the time, it felt great to be able to think really hard and earnestly about what the biggest initiatives that, for instance, city planning could do around land use were. I remember at the time thinking like, we're never going to do these. There's just not the political possibility. There's not the political will to, for instance, go into low density districts and try to enable housing in low density districts again. You know, the conversation has changed a lot, even in just the last 4 years. So we are actually, you know, just taking initiatives that we laid out in Where We Live, our fair housing reporting, chapter 6, goals, strategies, and concrete actions, and we've packaged them as part of a citywide housing text that is the most meaningful thing we've done to address fair housing in the city's history. Now, it's a citywide text, and we see that as complementary to neighborhood planning efforts and other types of land use efforts that we're doing elsewhere in the city. Think of City of Yes for housing opportunity as a little bit everywhere, incremental changes across the widest possible geography. Like I said, we are still engaging in neighborhood planning efforts like you just had in Soho, in places like Aim Up, Crown Heights, Long Island City, Jamaica, a few other places where, you know, it's bigger changes across a narrower geography that can also be significant in, you know, pursuing the city's planning goals. So of course we are always, you know, walking and chewing gum at the same time, trying to in pursuit of our planning goals. But I can say without a doubt that this citywide is you know, the biggest thing that we've ever done on fair housing lines, such as you suggested.
I see your hand, David Carter. Can you promote Emma and Matthew? Are you in the driver's seat?
I have the mouse.
Okay, thank you.
Grab it.
Oh,
Oh, sorry for that.
And Anita, I think is there. Or was.
he's in the panel.
What was it that you wanted?
Anita's in the panelists already.
They have to accept.
And Matthew.
Yes, they accept.
Oh, okay.
I'm here,
Okay.
Anita. I'm right here.
Oh, thank you, Anita. I didn't know that. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, David, did you have a?
Yeah, John? It's David Gruber here.
Hi, David.
A lot to absorb in a very intense presentation, so maybe you could just backtrack. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you.
So you threw out a number that the city's producing 20,000. Oh,
I keep going.
20,000 units a year, about 100,000. That's affordable units you're talking about. Was it? What is? You threw out the number. What is it that you're saying?
So the city produces about 20,000 units overall, give or take, and that includes affordable and market rate housing production. And then when I say the projections for this, which is up to 110 or so thousand units over 15 years, that also includes all housing units, market rate, affordable.
Okay, so that's your 500,000, as you say, moonshot.
We don't quite get, with background plus City of Yes for housing opportunity, we don't quite get there, but we're doing other things as well, including neighborhood planning efforts and advocating for changes at the state. So we hope to hit it. City of Yes doesn't get it done in one fell swoop.
Okay, fair. So it's a pastiche of several programs. Okay, I'm trying to figure it out because so when we talk about 12 and 18 FARs, so you're saying that, part of why Hudson Square didn't work is, and I negotiated that community board, with, Trinity, was because the Bloomberg administration, first of all, it wasn't mandatory. And second of all, we didn't incentivize enough for landlords to go and use the additional FAR. It wasn't enough because demand was so great, they'd rather take the 9 FAR as of right rather than the 10 FAR as of right, as it were, and not bother with taking the incentivized additional FAR, which was puny. But are we not having the same thing on an 18 FAR? Isn't 70%? I'm just trying to get this. 70% of it will be market rate, maybe more. 75% will be market rate, and 25% of the 18 FAR would be affordable housing with varying AMIs, and some of it permanent and some of it not permanent. Did I get that right?
Yeah, roughly. If an 18 FAR district gets mapped, it'll have MIH. It would include 20 to 30% mandatory affordable housing. That's right.
20 to 30. That's I did get it right. So again, we're building essentially, and you use an interesting word, soul crushing numbers for housing, but we're continuing doing it if the 18 or 12 or 14 FARs are going to be essentially market rate housing, essentially, especially in our district, where, as you point out, it's enormous. So we're building a lot of luxury housing, and we're getting bits and pieces of affordable housing. Or they don't have to do that at all. They don't have to go into the mandatory program, right? They could just do as of right without any house, without any.
Well, the thing with mandatory is that you can't build anything at all unless you provide that percentage of affordable housing.
So that's the mandatory. So you can't avail yourself of the 18 FAR and build 70%, 75, 80% of market without putting 20% affordable housing. AMIs to vary district to district. So still, this area is going to get inundated with luxury housing. And, we're all waiting to have not just 30 or 40. I mean, I've always been an advocate of not just 30 or 40 AMIs, because the fabric of the city, I always say here in downtown, cop and a school teacher who are married, have 2 kids in college, needs affordable housing. And of course, they're not going to get it because their income is well past 40 AMI. And so, the fabric of the city isn't just 30 or 40 AMIs. And I'm seeing this sort of like looking after the middle class, as well as, and you could argue with me saying, oh, the great demand is people on the lower end. I get it. I understand that, but we're not providing that if with these massive zoning allowances in FAR, they're still not going to be. She said to me, listen, you could build 50 mandatory 50%, affordable housing if you're going to avail yourself of 18 FAR, but that's not what you're saying. So I don't see it. I don't see that we're making dents. I don't see the middle class at 80s or 90s or 110, 120 AMIs. Everybody's always talking about 30s and 40s and 50s. And our middle class, where do they go? We're losing out. Where do they go? Where does the Compton school teacher go? In New York City, to housing that they go for.
Those are great points. With MIH, we actually have a few different options. There's option 1, which is 25% at an average of 60% AMI. Option 2, which is 30% at an average of 80% AMI. So, greater set-asides, but higher AMIs. And then option 3 is 20% at an average AMI of 40% AMI. So you can see how there's that trade-off there that individual community boards and individual council members can express their preferences on for their neighborhood. And so we do see parts of Lower Manhattan, Community Board 4, as you know, they often advocate for middle income housing precisely for the reasons that you suggest. And, you know, MIH offers those options whenever it's mapped as well. It so happens that most of the time people want the lowest AMIs possible. But even in that situation, income averaging enables you to hit a range, you know, getting up to 80, 90, 100. And so income averaging is I think the crucial way that you hit a broader range of families and not just folks at one income band.
Okay. Frederica has a question.
So if you're lifting the cap from the FAR cap from 12 to 18, why are you keeping the percentage of affordable housing the same? Why isn't that going up correspondingly?
So when it comes to mandatory programs and when it comes to actually producing affordable units, the name of the game is obviously feasibility. If you're requiring 50% affordable or something like that, that just does not actually pencil out, then you end up with, you know, big fat zero affordable units. So we have always been in kind of a cat and mouse game with the state to try to ensure that our affordable housing programs are working in conjunction with the state level tax benefit, because we've learned from long experience in New York City that you can't just require affordable housing and expect to see it. There has to be some means of support for it as well. And when we have affordable housing requirements and programs like UAP that play nice with the state level tax incentives, then we see a ton of affordable housing. When we don't, like, you know, up until a couple weeks ago, there was no tax incentive at all. Well, you know, MIH unfortunately was not feasible. And so we didn't see any of it newly permitted in the time when the state tax benefit was expired. But we are very encouraged now that we think we have a state tax incentive that works well, both with MIH and our proposed UAP. And because we're taking an inclusionary framework and expanding it to all medium and high density districts across the city, we expect to see an explosion of income restricted units in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
We're going to, Ryder Kessler has his hand up, and then we will go to Andrew Berman. We'll let the public speak.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I guess I have a question that's related to David's question, which is, you know, there was a report earlier today that rents in New York are increasing 7 times faster than incomes. And you talked about some of the facts about homelessness and displacement and so forth. To David's point, like, yes, I think our board generally, we love incremental units of income restricted housing. We like affordable housing units, but affordable housing units are not enough to solve this crisis because there aren't enough of them to house everyone. So we need housing affordability across the board. We need market rate units to be more affordable. Right now, to Frederica's point, like and Carter and multiple, like everything in our district is luxury because there's so little of it. Like my 1-bedroom apartment on West 11th is luxury, not because it's nice, but because it's on West 11th Street. So why you say that this is like the biggest change in city history? Yes, it's updating 60-year-old zoning tax, but it's not like, why aren't we creating 1 million units of new, like, why aren't we going bigger? We need so much more housing. We need so much more market rate housing too everywhere to truly get to that affordability. Yes, incremental market rate units will help towards affordability, but they won't really make the dent we need as fast as we need. So why isn't this way bigger? Why isn't this a zoning text amendment to produce 1 million new units in 10 years rather than 100,000?
Got you. Great question. I would say that the whole approach here is how much housing can we get without fundamentally altering neighborhood character across the city. And I think that that's actually kind of important. I take your point, but if we are doing a citywide effort like this, we don't have time, like in a neighborhood planning effort, to take a look at every individual site within that rezoning area to understand fully like what it would mean for that site. And so I think it's important when you're going so broad geographically to implement relatively incremental changes. But it makes a lot of sense because we really can get a lot of housing overall just by going so broad geographically. that's the secret sauce here. I know it might sound underwhelming to say that our environmental review found that these proposals are expected to produce 1 unit per acre over the next 15 years. That sounds totally underwhelming. But you know, there's 200,000 acres in New York City. So, you know, it actually adds up to a significant amount of new housing. And we hope the fact that it's not intended, and we don't believe it will alter neighborhood character in any one place, enables, you know, folks who are nervous about that type of thing, about neighborhood change, to breathe a little bit easier and, you know, support our efforts to address our fundamental problems rather than, you know, reflexively oppose them. But I appreciate the sentiment.
They missed a part of the presentation. Can you guys cover the special Little Italy district?
Yeah.
And hold on. Sorry, Andrew. Hmm? Yeah.
Messing around with the slide.
Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of these changes are in line with the broader changes that I talked about for all special districts. So that would be updating the regulations to align with the underlying zoning districts and eliminating redundant bulk regulations, eliminating some rules that conflict with the citywide proposals. And so you can see on the right tables for FARs. These would be increasing FARs to align with the UAP framework in Area A and A1 in the Special Little Italy district.
Yeah, that's the standard 20% bump for affordable and supportive housing in those areas.
Some other things that are happening in this district, the masonry wall requirement, we're maintaining that. Max lot coverage, we're aligning those regulations with the underlying. We're also eliminating the rear height limit plane, and that's because we have a rear yard equivalent requirement now. Something else we're doing is we are eliminating the 30-foot rear yard requirement, and that's to align with the new underlying rule, which is only a 20-foot requirement. And then other things we're aligning with the underlying are floor area per room requirement, street wall, permitted recesses, setback, open space, landscaping, street trees, and conversion regulations. And then there are also some heights changing in the Special Little Italy district. So you can see that the old text or the current text reads that there was a 75 height or a 75-foot max height, and then there were no base height rules. And then the new regulations would align those with R7D regulations for corner lots, and then R8B regulations for interior and through lots.
So could you just help to, I don't think some people here would understand so much the rear yard, explain what that means in practice?
Which part of the, you mean eliminating the 30-foot rear yard requirement?
Correct, and that goes vertical, right, as opposed to just.
What do you mean it goes vertical?
Meaning that so I forget which is which, but some of them I don't think allow a lot of coverage, right? In that there's a rear yard setback, but this allows for more building in the back of the building.
Right, there's a height limit on there.
Within 20.
Yeah, just so people understand the rear yard setbacks, what that means as far as development, how that increases the amount.
My understanding is that we are reducing the requirement from 30 feet to 20 feet. I don't know if John can speak to what that means from a development standpoint.
Yeah, so reducing the rear yard requirement from 30 feet to 20 feet, and that's citywide, even in low density districts. In medium and high density districts, it's below a height of, I have to look it up. So let me see if I can find it during this meeting.
What's
If
that?
not, I can return it, or I can follow up with you.
Oh, sorry, but it basically means you get an extra 10 feet building space per floor going up through a building.
I
correct?
think it's just up to a height of 35 feet, but don't quote me on that. I gotta find it in the proposed text right now and
It
I'll
was
let
always
you know.
28 feet. I don't know. Yeah.
So, and, you know, when we find that height, we can get back to you. Below that height, yes, it would mean 10 extra feet of area that you can develop on.
Is this the only slide on space?
That's the small. What about the two big areas?
So there's, yeah, so I have two other slides.
Okay.
This is area B, the Houston Street corridor. Again, we're maintaining the masonry wall requirement. Similar to area A, the FARs are increasing to align with the UAP framework. And then you can see the current FARs, which are labeled as old, and then new FARs. Also similar changes to area A. Some heights are changing, and that would be to align with the UAP framework so that they can accommodate some of that additional FAR. And then other things that we are proposing to change are aligning with the underlying regulations for open space, landscaping, and street tree regulations that's similar to area A. And if all of this is a lot of information, because I know it's a lot on the slide, we put a lot of detail on here so that you all would be able to reference it and then come back with questions. So we're happy to take questions in writing as well and get you answers.
How does,
Then along, Janine, just finish and then along Bowery, the other district or the other section of the slip.
I'm sorry, I have one question. Are they changing the lot coverage requirements of the SLID? And how are those changing if they are? Because you just said underline, it changing with the underlying.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
And the rear yard changes are below a height of 75 feet. That's based on an old 6-story tenement with a 20-foot rear yard.
Here is corridor or area C. We are proposing to modify the heights. You can see the current regulations under old and then new, what's being proposed for base and max heights. The new would align with a C44A and an R7A. And then we're also aligning lot coverage, open space, and landscaping regulations with the underlying.
Can you go back one slide?
Yep.
Set it fine. Aligning with underlying regulations, eliminating open space landscaping. Oh, I see, maximum building height. When it says sky exposure plane, the ratio above base height. I'm just trying to get a sense of how much we're losing there. Just
Yeah, could you, like, on that section, could you explain, it says eliminate the open space
the
regulations.
sky exposure.
Yeah. Maybe.
So for
So
that,
it'd be, oh yeah, go ahead, John.
sorry, just in general, eliminating open space regulations, that's a remnant of old height factor zoning, you know, the 1961 tower in a park. We're gonna clear super blocks for urban renewal zoning. And it just is moving those into a contextual framework where instead of like these crazy tables where you're balancing open space against the height of the building against FAR, you just get like a flat 70% lot coverage maximum, for instance, in a way that's much easier to administer and leads to buildings that are more contextual with, you know, pre-1961 building in New York. So that's all that is.
I agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
That's true.
Okay, Carter. Andrew, you have been very patient. Can we, when I'll, allow you to talk?
Don't hear me.
Stays a second.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Good evening, Andrew.
Hi, thanks, everyone. So first, I just have a comment and then a couple of specific questions. I just wanted to start by kind of pushing back on the underlying premise here, which is that the city's affordability problems emanate from a lack of market rate housing. We've done an analysis over the last 65 years looking at how much housing the city added as compared to its population. And we found that consistently the city has added as much, if not more, housing than the amount of people that it's added. And in fact, in the last 3 years, the rate of housing addition has been much greater than the rate of population, which has sunk. But clearly our housing is getting much more expensive. And that seems to clearly tell us that just having more housing doesn't make your housing cheaper. So it's a bit too big of an issue to really debate here, but I just want to sort of put that out there, that this underlying premise that we're going to solve our affordability problems by simply having more housing is not borne out by the facts. So moving into the kind of specifics here.
Can I just respond to that quickly? Because there is a quick response. So if you go back to, it's a couple sentences. If you go back to 1950, for instance, in New York City, the average household size was above 3.5. Today, average household size is below 2.5. Just that decrease in people per households alone means you need 1 million more units. So one of the big drivers, both if you look back historically to 1950, but even if you look to the past few years, the post-COVID work from home situation, it's the people per household is going down, and it's putting a ton of additional pressure on our housing market. It's not just people being born or moving here from, elsewhere in the United States or from other countries. It's, people per household going down, and that creates a ton of demand for housing that is not expressed by population alone.
Right, but John, as you know, the city's lost 600,000 people in the last 3 years, even as we've added more housing.
John,
prices going.
Let Andrew give his questions, and then we'll.
Yeah, let's hear him out.
Yeah, we can't allow this back and forth. Andrew, said you had 2 questions. So John, hold your horses, and we'll hear what Andrew's questions are.
Right. So the specific questions that I have, 2 of them relate to the ways in which City of Yes is proposing to increase the allowable size of purely market rate development, specifically in areas like Community Board 2. So one of the proposals is to change the contextual zoning rules in Community Boards 1 through 8 Manhattan to allow larger, purely market rate development. I'd like to ask you to provide information specifically about what that would look like and why DCP believes that's a good thing to do. Similarly, as you mentioned in your presentation, it sounds as though what you're planning on doing for the voluntary inclusionary housing zones is to increase the allowable size of as of right market rate development, for instance, from 9 to 10, and then you have the option of adding on 2 FAR affordable to get to 12, whereas under the current rules, if you don't do affordable, you can only do about 9 FAR. So why would we be giving developers this additional FAR just for building more market rate housing, not for adding the additional affordable housing?
What I was saying.
Gotcha. So I don't know if,
John, just a minute. Are those your questions, Andrew?
No, I've two more. So, you mentioned that. for
can I
a
maybe
lot of-
answer them in
let him
turn, just
talk.
so I don't have to like
All right,
remember? I can answer those questions
long as I get to
relatively
ask
briefly.
Is that
all of
okay
them,
with the,
that's
it's not
fine.
normally the way we do it, but is that okay with the committee?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so first off, I don't know, maybe people are aware, maybe they're not. But in the Manhattan core, there are certain zoning districts that have lower FARs and heights than their counterparts everywhere else in the city. That is, less central locations for some reason have higher FARs and higher heights for the same zoning districts. Those were results of exclusionary political deals in the past that, as part of a fair housing proposal, of course we need to unwind. That is exclusionary zoning, plain and simple. And so we were undoing those sins of the past. So that's what's going on in Manhattan community districts 1 through 8 in places where FARs and heights have been exclusionarily suppressed. Next, yes, we're replacing the voluntary inclusionary program housing programs with the UAP framework. And the council members we've talked to are ecstatic about it. And the housing advocates we've talked about are ecstatic about it. Because today, the voluntary inclusionary program creates units at 80% AMI and only 80% AMI. So if you don't earn 79% of AMI, you're out of luck. Those units aren't for you. And 80% AMIs have gone up and up and up in the last few years too, and so they're not what they used to be. We are replacing the voluntary frameworks with UAP that creates units at an average of 60% AMI. So 60% AMI is way better than 80. And when you add in income averaging, you can hit 30% AMI, 40% AMI, 50% AMI, and also 70 and 80 and 92 to the folks who want middle income housing in a way that everybody agrees is just way better than the status quo. And it extends that framework across all medium and high density districts instead of having 4 different regimes that creates unnecessary complexity and suppresses development. So we feel good about both of those things.
John, that's not what I asked you about. I'm not questioning the part about changing the rules around the affordable housing that you get to build. What I'm talking about is that if I heard you correctly, if you don't choose to build, if you don't choose to include affordable housing in those zones, you could now go up to 10 FAR market rate, whereas before you could only go up to 9.
We're
Correct?
replacing the regimes so that we have with a better system with lower AMIs. We're not taking any market rate housing away from people. They could do that today. They could build in those zones today, purely market. And like Ryder said, market rate housing is important as well.
But under the changes that you're proposing, with no affordable housing whatsoever, it would go up to 10 FAR, correct?
The great thing is, because this clicks into the existing zoning framework, we can actually do a little thought experiment and figure out how many additional income restricted units we would have created since 2014 if UAP had been in place. And if 100% affordable housing developments are a little bit bigger, and if mixed income market rate housings are a little bit bigger, we would create 20,000 additional affordable units.
You're avoiding answering the
I'm
question.
not, Andrew. I'm telling you how much it makes sense to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of time here, John.
One at a time.
Okay, Andrew's third question, and John will respond, but one at a time.
Well, I also just want to say that this supposed exclusionary deal about limiting the size of luxury market rate housing in the neighborhood was actually done under the de Blasio administration just a few years ago. Yes, it was. When what they did was they changed the rules for contextual zoning under what they called zoning for quality and affordability, which was neither, and lifted the zoning limits in several districts throughout the city. But because neighborhoods like ours fought back and said, we didn't want it lifted for market rate development in our neighborhood, they did not do it here. But now under City of Yes, they would do it. And that's just a fact.
Yes,
So
we are undoing exclusionary political deals in the past. It's really important part of our fair housing plan.
Question three, Andrew, please move on.
All right. Well, I wish we were playing so fast and loose with the facts here. But so the other question I have is the Department of City Planning going to provide any information about where extent of air rights transfers that would be enabled from individual landmarks, of which there are several dozen in Community Board 2, and exactly where they could go. You showed an example, a sort of hypothetical example of one, but it would be very helpful to see within Community Board 2 the range of areas that would be covered by the new potential allowance for air rights transfers from individual landmarks, and similarly, whether or not and where there are any sites in Community Board 2 that the allowance for development on what you refer to as campuses would be applicable.
Are those separate questions around landmark, TDR, and campus, or are they combined? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
You could answer them separately or together. Doesn't matter.
Okay. On landmark TDRs, yes, your community district has never had one over the roughly 60 years of the program's existence, because today the transfer radiuses are extremely tight and the public review is extremely onerous. You got to do a full special permit to transfer even to basically your next door neighbor or immediately across the street. So in order to create meaningful opportunities to help maintain landmarks, which, as you know, sometimes are in desperate financial straits, we are proposing to increase the transfer radius and reduce procedure. If you need bulk modifications on your site in order to accommodate those TDRs, then you'd have to go through public review that included an authorization going to the commission. If, on the other hand, you don't need any bulk modifications on the receiving site at all, then it could be a mere certification. Our environmental review, as I mentioned, does not go site by site. That would be something that would be totally impossible for an initiative that's as broad geographically as this is. But we can provide, a list of all individual landmarks in Community Board 2, so that you could take a closer look at those if you wanted to.
Last question. And what about the campuses, John?
Andrew, what was the question on campuses? I'm not sure I caught it.
Can you show us where within Community Board 2 the changes in terms of the allowances for what are considered campuses would be applicable? Where in Community Board 2 are there quote unquote campuses?
So it's a little more complex than was presented here. Basically, our initiatives are intended to provide new infill opportunities for zoning lots with existing buildings on them. And that could be zoning lots of any size. As it is today, if you have a zoning lot with a height factor building on it, that is 1961 rezoning, tall, skinny buildings, we're going to clear sites for urban renewal projects. If you have a building like that on your zoning lot today, you typically cannot do modern height-limited contextual infill because of mixing rules that don't enable you to mix and match different zoning types. Typically, the existing building's too tall, so you're not allowed to do infill. Who cares how tall the existing building is? It exists. So we are providing opportunities for infill sites, on zoning lots with existing buildings. That can be any size. Now, if you're above 20,000 square feet in size, lots above 20,000 square feet, you will have access to more flexible contextual envelopes, a little more height, that enable you to do infill in a contextual way while taking up less open space on the 20,000 plus square foot zoning lot. However, if you're really big, if you're like 1.5 acres or more, then actually, rather than allowances, you have special limits on your lot coverage maximum. For instance, if you had a campus above 1.5 acres, you can't cover more than 50% of your lot, whereas underlying lot coverage ratios are typically 70% or even more. For a campus of that type, it would be limited to 50% to ensure that you are preserving the types of open space on those campuses that people use, not empty parking lots, not, stuff that people don't use, but, places that have development rights and footprint to put buildings would have additional opportunities for new housing in community districts like yours.
John, I think the question was, have you identified specific spots in Community Board 2 that are, that meet these new ideas, new regulations? And just to bear in mind, we're sitting here in one of those campus spots.
Me too.
And there's another one across the street. So it's very real to us at in this moment.
No, I hear you. Again, the environmental review that we did for these proposals, because of its citywide nature, are not site by site like you would do for, a private rezoning or a neighborhood rezoning like Soho, NoHo. So we do not have a list of projected or potential sites for your community district alone. We have instead unit projections based on how the components would apply and the availability of sites in your community district. Chelsea dropped the environmental review in the chat. We would encourage you to take a look and then come back to us with specific questions, and we can take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few more questions in the chat.
Okay, Andrew, there's some other questions that we want to get to, so thank you very much.
Pete had asked a few things. I don't know if you want to have Pete ask his questions, but there are a bunch in chat.
Okay.
Can we elevate Pete?
Pete, did you want to ask your questions verbally instead of having us go through the chat? Because I think some of your questions were specific as the presentation was going along.
You have a question?
Doesn't have his number. Oh, one new message.
That was
The chat's okay, is what he said.
okay. Okay, I guess he's saying, all right, so I'll
Maybe you should put his hand up if he wants to speak.
The chat is okay. Oh,
There's the chat.
Yeah, he said the chat's okay, so I'll just go through.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, John, it's a little harder for us here to navigate through.
So we have a question here if we're.
okay, okay. Let us,
No problem.
what's your name?
Andrew?
Thank you. What did you say?
It's an easy name to remember.
Oh,
All of our public questions.
yeah, very clever.
Sorry, set up the opposite of how.
I know, we're trying here.
Do any of the
So he did speak to that.
the building? There's a.
So one of the questions was, is there a mechanism to mandate that a conversion of multiple units to a smaller number of units, thereby lowering the number of dwelling units and resulting in an overall loss of housing? I'm not sure what this is, but can you see the chat, John?
Yeah, I can see the chat.
Yeah, so there's some questions in there. It might be helpful if you look through them and just speak to them if you're able to.
I mean, there are questions about, can there be a maximum size of a dwelling unit? I believe that there's a prominent, there's just been a prominent lawsuit about that at Trump Tower. So, but is there a maximum dwelling size, John, on the record, is the question?
No, there's no maximum dwelling size. There'd be no way for zoning to absolutely prevent somebody from buying an old townhome or whatever and reconverting it to single family use. Typically, when you're talking about zoning or zoning authority, you're talking about things that have to be traceable in some way to like health and safety concerns. And so it's kind of hard to come up with a health and safety rationale to prevent things from like unit combinations or reconversions from multifamily to single family townhome. The way to approach that, and I was just talking to some planners in San Francisco about this issue the other day as well. The way to address concerns over unit combinations and things like that is really to make sure that you're enabling enough background housing production that things like that are just background noise. And that's the way it is in most of the city. In most of the city, we're producing enough we're not producing enough overall, but enough housing so that a family's decision to like buy the next apartment over in a co-op and break down the wall, or some rich guy's decision to buy a brownstone in Brooklyn and reconvert it to single family use, that it doesn't like result in an overall loss of housing like we see in some parts of Upper East Side, Upper West Side, and Community District 2.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, John, Pete's now.
Okay. Gotcha.
John, the fact is that CB2 has experienced a loss of housing because of the conversions, the combining, the Frankensteining, the mansions. So this is not like theoretical. This is going on. So my question is, what kind of things can be put into place so that the community gets a benefit when somebody essentially takes housing away from us by building a mansion. That's why I asked about.
No, you're totally right. I
Is
mean,
there a mechanism when someone does that?
yeah,
Is
the
there a
mechanism to
possibility?
address that situation is to enable enough housing to be built so that you're not caught in that zero-sum
I
situation.
understand that's the goal, but CB2 doesn't have, we're a finite space built out for 200 years. And so I think you guys got to be a little bit more imaginative and maybe create something that says, okay, you want to do that? You want to take away this housing? Take a chunk of money, and there's a fee for that. Once you do that, and we'll use that to make up for the housing you are stealing from the community. Because essentially it's stealing space.
I will say about 194 out of 197 neighborhood tabulation areas across the city managed not to lose housing by enabling enough housing production in order to avoid absolute housing loss from things like unit combinations or reconversions from multifamily to single family brownstones or things like that.
That's not the case,
How do
CB2.
you
I mean,
analyze
John,
that?
it's a little disingenuous to say that because.
And we are absolutely confident that these proposals can enable enough new
Bayside,
housing.
maybe.
We are absolutely confident that these proposals together can enable enough new housing in community district 2 so that you will not be, among those 3 out of 197 NTAs across the city that are actually losing housing to this. But when it comes to what legal when it comes to what legal obstacles you can place in the way of somebody from buying a building and doing what they want with it, we just don't have the legal authority to interfere with something like that. I'm
So,
sorry. I wish it
sort
were
of
otherwise, but it's true.
Okay, so if it's a position of DCP, that any sort of conversion fee is not possible, that's good to know. My next question was, there's an encouragement here for building out into the rear space, the rear yards. How much open rear yard space, which is now green space, will be lost by turning it into built space through the encouragement of that action?
We did analyze that during the environmental review, and there is no net increment overall.
No loss of green rear yard?
Yeah, with respect to the no action condition, i.e. the world without these proposals, it's in the environmental review, which Chelsea dropped into the chat. It's the chapter on impervious spaces. I don't have all the details on that, but it is something we kept a close eye on.
Do you have another question, Pete?
Nope, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have a question in the room. Andrew?
Hi, thank you so much.
Need to move up. Oh, yeah, you've got to get closer.
I just did.
Say it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm a resident of CB2. I've been here a couple of times. It's great to see you all again. I just wanted to say a couple things about the plan to DCP and then ask some questions. So the first thing that I have is a question, ideally for someone at DCP. So do you know, how does CB2 compare to, in terms of housing production, in terms of new units as a percentage, et cetera, to our neighbors to the north, for instance, in CB4, or our, something like Greenpoint in Brooklyn, or something like East New York?
Yeah, I see Chelsea has put on the basic map of the community districts where you can see. I can also drop a link in the chat to our housing and economy page, which has 2 things that might be of interest that they're more dynamic and they show it a higher geographic resolution. And that's our housing production snapshot from 2023 and then where is new housing being added, which takes a look over a slightly longer time scale. And you can get a sense of housing production in different parts of CB2 over the last decade or so, and how they compare to other parts of the city. So I can put that in the chat or otherwise circulate it. But this is more or less a pretty good portrayal of where CB2 is at relative to other community districts in the city.
Qualitatively, would you say that CB2 is doing as much as its neighbors?
I mean, every community district is different, right? I mean, there are opportunities in Community District 4, which had lots of manufacturing space that was rezoned to residential and had a lot of development sites. So I don't want to say that it's an apple to apples comparison, but we do think that through proposals like the ones we presented today, that Community District 2 can produce a little more housing, and we think that that would be a good thing.
Right.
Can I just jump in? First of all, that's like apples to orange, what you just talked about.
Yep,
Because
that's
we
what
just
I said.
Yeah, but we just addressed Hudson Square, which is a failure by the city.
And that isn't
No, no, no. The way you said it's by district, it's a total failure by the city because the rezonings consistently don't get what they want. And that's what we keep saying over and over again. So what you're saying is like there's some failure. It's the city's failure on the rezonings. Almost all the rezonings don't end up with what they want. You also have an as-built environment that we have. In CB4, you have wide swaths of areas that were rezoned where there's not displacement of people who live there. The majority of the buildings that happens in CB2, like me, was the example I use personally, where I was displaced for a single family home. That's happening. It's disingenuous for John when he's saying that it's background noise when it is for us every month after month after month. Every single townhome had multiple units in the West Village, specifically in Greenwich Village. Every application is resulting in displacement.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, the inability to build housing puts so much pressure on the existing stock. And it's more typical that just means that rents go up, but in hyper, high markets like you have in parts of Community District 2, it leads to things like that. And so, the fundamental driver of that is the zero-sum nature by the capped housing stock that you see in Community District 2.
Right. What I'm just saying is that what you're trying to build is what we lose every month, which are one-bedrooms, studios that are recombined.
Yeah, we have to reverse those trends. Agree with you.
But when you're dismissive here of that somehow the production of housing isn't happening, but that's because of this failure of the city to move quickly enough to incentivize that housing. And we've had multiple buildings. Disney moved in and took up a square block. We only have so many spaces where that can occur. And what's happening is we're getting office buildings over and over and over again.
I couldn't agree. Yeah.
When you guys keep coming and saying that we're not keeping up with housing production, when in fact we're helping meet the city's goals of its commercial needs in other ways. And now the areas where commercial has traditionally existed from the last 5 years, the city's not moving fast enough to repurpose those. And instead, people are coming here to build boutique buildings for themselves.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more.
And that's our issue. And that's what we need to change here if you want us to help meet these housing needs, because the few spaces we have aren't going towards housing. And that's because the developers, who are the decision makers, are deciding to do that because we have almost no city-owned land. And so I guess when the city of Yes, which is helping to add a little bit everywhere, but we don't have anything to add to because the choice
we have no
over and over again is not to build housing.
Well, look what happened to the Google building. We were going to have hundreds of.
Google building is an example. We have, hundreds of affordable units were going to be produced there, and now you got Google office building.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was Carter talking. I couldn't agree more, Carter. I do not mean to put any blame on the community board or the people in Community District 2. I think that you're correct. The blame does lie with the city and if you look at where we live, our fair housing reporting, in particular, chapter 2, it talks about the long history of decisions made by policymakers and elected officials in the city of New York that got us to where we are today, which is, a tremendously diverse but very segregated city, a city where there is just that lacks housing opportunities, especially in certain parts. And these housing opportunity proposals represent our earnest efforts to undo decades of bad and harmful policy decisions that have led us to the present moment. And so I think that we are working together with you in line with your comments that you just made in ways to address some of the issues with the housing market in Community District 2 that we've been talking about all night. And so I agree with you, is what I'm saying.
The point is that this doesn't incentivize the building of housing. And this goes along with building housing that is built. And whereas most of our area is built. And in order for the areas where people would make choices to build, there are generally rental buildings, and results into displacement of a current population, which you said is part of the goal of City of Yes, to retain neighborhoods. So it puts us in a very complicated place where new development is really where this should be happening, but the thumb's not on that scale.
Okay, you know what, John, Andrew has been waiting patiently to finish his question, so.
Okay, sorry.
That's Andrew, thank you.
You have no space.
We have no place to put it.
Go ahead, you're ready.
We're putting it with the oldest neighborhood in the city.
I have to ignore them.
No space.
Question.
Yeah, please.
I understand there are a lot of concerns in this room that developers will not use all these provisions, such as UAP, for instance. But I want to be a little bit clear about our options. I think at the moment we can either leave things the way that they are and get no new affordable housing, which is more or less to about 100 units, what CB2 has built in the last 10 years, or we can make the changes, including UAP. And some of the developers, I'm not sure if it'll be all of them or if it'll be 30% of them or 70% of them, but some of them will say yes to that and we'll build more affordable housing. But either way, if we do enact these changes, as I understand it, we will produce a lot more affordable housing than CB2 is currently producing. I also want to reiterate some other points that people were making on down conversions and on those consolidations. That is a major problem in CB2, maybe more than any other community district in the city. I want to bring up the concept of highest and best use here, that in a lot of cases, if you have a lot that's 20 feet wide and 100 feet deep, when an area like this gets as affluent as it is, people will find the highest and best use of that to convert that, let's say, 5-story townhouse to be having essentially a single family home, basically a suburb. I would like to point out that that is in some ways a consequence of the zoning that we have here in CB2. If we were zoned for higher densities, let's say something more similar to the Upper West Side, then you would be able to develop a larger, taller building on that land that has multiple units in it, more apartments, and you are able to actually justify economically as a developer to create more smaller, and in many cases due to UAP, affordable units on that land.
What are you gonna do? Build up on the existing?
You mean displace people that are living?
New York has
knock
very
down-
strong displacement.
And knock down the building that's already there?
Yes.
I just want, I
You want to
don't,
knock down people.
No, I think, okay, but.
I don't, not with a minute. I'd like to pay them to leave and pay them to have a nice house elsewhere, or even in the same thing. There's the Greek concept, for instance, of polykotokia is a model that allows you to take an existing building and then to build a larger building in its place and to create homes for everyone who is currently in the building in the next one. Well, that's Shelley Silver's problem. That's
and I don't see you win.
not a great guy. I've got some issues there.
Okay.
Great, is that?
No, I have some more things. Other questions?
Questions or is it just statements that you
Like Andrew Berman, it's a mix of questions and comments.
Not Andrew Berman.
Sorry, I'm not. I'm doing my best. I want to talk a little bit about SROs. For much
You
of
have a
New York.
question about SROs?
Yeah, do you have a question?
Yes, please make it a question.
Yes.
That's appropriate.
Well, can I just say something?
Yes.
If we're done, if you don't have questions, that's fine. But we don't have to keep DCP here because they're here to answer our questions.
Right.
So then we can listen.
We can go to business session.
Right,
Is
and
it
then-
appropriate for business?
Questions for DCP.
I'm happy to listen to comments as well, you know.
Welcome to stay on.
It's all helpful.
Right, but we also need to get to business session.
Yes.
Guys, this is the public hearing. It's not questions only. Just so everybody knows, this is our only public hearing.
Sorry, Carter, you can't go on and on without asking questions, sorry.
Yes, you can. We can public hearing. Nobody put a time limit on it.
For what it's worth, I would point out that
I'm sorry.
Gentlemen, gentlemen.
Sorry.
Andrew is going to do his best to pose some questions so that, because it is our opportunity.
I will be as brief as I can.
To hear from DCP.
And thank you all for your time, particularly to everyone at DCP who is spending your night with us. I really appreciate that.
They're getting paid for it, we're not.
Unfortunately,
Thank God.
thank you as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the shared housing proposal. Shared housing was a safety net that was just above homelessness for a lot of New Yorkers for most of New York's history prior to about 1960. I'd like to point out that with this proposal, we are not stopping people from living in, if we block this proposal rather, we are not stopping people from living in bad conditions. And by the way, I would add that I lived in shared housing for 4 years. It was called college. It was great. That what shared housing is doing is it's essentially providing the cheapest form of housing for those whose alternative is to sleep on the street or to sleep in a shelter. We are living in a housing crisis. We have over 100,000 New Yorkers sleeping on the street and in shelters every night. And there absolutely must be low-cost options if we want to curb the homelessness crisis. It is our moral imperative to provide those options. I believe it is unconscionable to block this. And my question here is, would you envision any shared housing being built in this district?
I can say that, believe it or not, shared housing exists, if not within the bounds of Community District 2 proper, very nearby. We have struggled for years with how to formalize and legalize existing informal housing in parts of Chinatown that have been subdivided into shared housing models. It's not a supportive housing model with supportive, services or anything like that. It's just people who, as you suggest, need a low-cost housing option in a location that works for them. So when I think of what I love about the shared housing proposals, it's not just the new shared housing that we will be able to create. Again, and for families or for people at range of incomes, it's not just, people who are one step from homelessness. It's also recent college graduates. It's also older people as well. But when I think of what I'm most excited about from shared housing, it's the ability to actually formally legalize what we see as informal SROs in parts of Chinatown today. And so we're working with groups like AFI, working with groups like Take Root to actually preserve and protect an important source of housing not too far away from Community District 2. And so I appreciate your sentiments and I agree with them.
We have two that are, one's vacant at 218 Bowery, luxury hotel, 340 Bowery, the old White House Hotel. They're all hotels. So the point that we were making, or I was making earlier, is that you can't force people to build them.
You can hope.
No, but I mean, they're existing and they're all being converted away. That's the follow-up question.
Yeah.
John, I guess I think you talked about like informal.
I lost the audio.
Sorry,
I lost the audio too.
I inadvertently got muted.
Yeah.
I was just Googling while you were talking about that sort of thing and found from, it seems to be from Q, so I'm hoping it's reliable, saying that 42% of adults in New York live in shared household homes, like living with roommates or like multiple families in this, like, so they're sharing kitchens, they're sharing bathrooms, like that's the population. But I'm saying, like, isn't that when we're talking about people currently in New York who are forced by financial exigency to sublet a bedroom or live with strangers. Like, we already have a widespread status quo where people are have a bedroom but are sharing other facilities, right? Like that's the equivalent we're looking at.
Yes, I agree with that in sentiment. So the difference is for shared housing, we would formally allow individuals to lease bedrooms, individually, as opposed to the way it works today, where sure, you may live with strangers in a 3-bedroom apartment or whatever, but you're putting you're paying rent to whoever's name is on the lease, that sort of thing. But you're correct that the fundamental living arrangement where you're potentially sharing a bathroom with a stranger is already extremely widespread in New York City. What we're trying to do is to free up some of those family units where that exists today for actual, families with kids who today just get outbid for those units. Who's going to get that 2-bedroom in Crown Heights? 2 recent college graduates or like a mother and 2 kids? It's going to be the 2 college graduates every time. And that's another deficiency in our housing market.
But one thing, John, can I just say this? It's been, I'm sure you know this, it's very common in what we call the outer boroughs, Queens and Brooklyn, especially, for somebody to have a 4-bedroom apartment. They have the lease and they rent them individually. And this has gone on for years and years and years. And real estate brokers will say, you can, when they're trying to sell an apartment or a building, they'll say, you can get X per bedroom. So this is a practice that exists. So what you're suggesting now is that change here would legalize that in some way or make it easier for that to happen. Could you explain that?
Yeah, along with changes to the housing maintenance code, it would just bring this into the formal legal system with all the additional protections that implies. There are so many housing types in New York City, whether it's illegal basement apartments or informal SROs, like I just mentioned in Chinatown, or even just, strangers sharing a 4-bedroom in Bushwick or whatever, that can benefit from being formally recognized so that you can implement.
But how would you do that? But give me a few details of how would that be done? Like what changes would you implement to institutionalize?
So basically, as suggested, I believe by Andrew, rooming units have been banned. New rooming units have been banned in New York City since the 1950s as part of the backlash against the unsavory characters who lived in SROs. And a lot of you have lived through, the last couple decades of New York City land use. You may remember during the Koch administration, where all of a sudden folks realized how closing all the old SROs had contributed gravely to the street homelessness crisis. And the city did a 180 and then said, actually, if you have an SRO, you're not allowed to convert it to any other use. It's got to remain an SRO forever. The city lost a legal case around that, but it never undid that ban on new rooming units that's been in the housing maintenance code since 1954. And so we are now looking at, with HPD regulatory agreement projects at its core, we are now looking to re-legalize that housing type, which has been legalized in jurisdictions across the city, across the country, and has provided an important source of housing for all those household types I mentioned: young households, older households, marginally housed households. The sky has not fallen. And so we want to bring it back to New York City as well to serve that underserved niche of the housing market.
So I get it, but because I'm a little OCD, what would you call that? Like what's the zoning designation for that kind of a setup?
Well, right now, rooming units is in the zoning resolution now, and rooming units are a habitation that lacks either full cooking or sanitary facilities. So if you're in a 3-bedroom apartment and you're renting those bedrooms out individually, those bedrooms don't have individual cooking or sanitary facilities. If they have a lock on the door, technically those are rooming units and they're banned under zoning. We see it in different parts of the city, but it's banned under zoning. And so what you see is situations like in Chinatown where tenants are afraid to call 311 for really egregious violations because they know they're living in an illegal situation that could just lead to a vacate order rather than, addressing issues with the landlord. So it's a very precarious situation.
So John, can you just take that the next step? What does this do to convert that unit that's rented that way into what you're talking about?
It removes the ban on rooming units in the zoning and in the housing maintenance code so that you can make that arrangement legal.
So what that would in turn for us, and this is my concern, actually makes it even more complicated because it would allow let's say where you can find this every day, just go look on Craigslist or anywhere else. Let's say look in Little Italy and somebody says, oh, I have 3 rooms in an apartment for rent. And they put it together. So now instead of the broker who sort of facilitates this and creates something, which is how it's done, the landlord can actually now turn in they can rent each individual bedroom. How does that address what you're talking about, freeing up space for families?
Yeah, if they wanted to do that, they could change the C of O to do that. But we're talking also about more primarily about new development as well, and the ability to do small and shared apartments and new construction too. So it involves legalization of existing informal arrangements, but also, it's forward-looking as well in perspective.
We understand that's great, but that's not our existing environment where we have the remnants of all the old tenement apartments throughout our districts. Many of the affordable units have been lost, as seem to have all the numbers, but you can see the loss of affordable units as those have been removed from rent stabilization up to 2019. These are still not necessarily desirable apartments in the way that they're built, but it seems that that's what we would be contending with, is actually that shift, which wouldn't necessarily lower housing costs. It would allow the owners of those buildings to actually maximize their revenue by, instead of having to find somebody to do this underneath them who signs the lease, that they can actually go on a monthly basis and rent them out to the highest payer. And I don't know if that actually creates the stability which people are looking for in the solution through City of Yes, right? I mean,
yeah, we've done extensive research on other New York City history and other jurisdictions around the country that have legalized more recently. And that's not what we've seen. We've seen it serving important underserved niches in the housing market that today create knock-on pressures for families, for people in gentrifying and lower income neighborhoods. And so, this is not going to revolutionize the way that housing works in any neighborhood in New York City, but it's part of a suite of efforts to serve underserved niches in the housing market that overall will have, will help us with the housing shortage.
I just want to ask one question, John. Reflecting on the roommate law, which is a state law, this idea does not need state mandate or any state.
You mean multiple dwelling?
Doesn't need a change in MDO.
Yeah, you don't need any state action to do this change on the shared housing?
No, yeah, we need to adjust the housing maintenance code in addition to zoning, but we do have the local authority to do this. The ban on rooming units is in local law.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Andrew, I think I see more things on your phone, and then you do a couple, and then we should let John, he's a member of the committee.
That sounds good. Thank you for answering all of those. As I'm sure many of you can guess, I was not around in 1954 when that change banning SROs was made. But I understand that they're a critical form of lower cost housing that we can reintroduce. They've supported folks who need simple accommodations here in New York for decades, as John said, not always, but very often low income. I wasn't alive for this either, but when my ancestors came to New York before World War II, I would assume they probably lived in shared housing as well, and I'm very grateful that they were able to. Proposals like this are critical to ensuring that New York remains a city that's open to immigrants and to newcomers. I mean, if you think about someone like Bob Dylan, who's probably more of a village icon than anyone, when he came here, arriving from Minnesota with very few dollars in his pocket, I would assume that he spent time living in an SRO. which is a critical form of low-cost housing.
Until he moved to the Sullivan Street Garden.
Yes, exactly.
I would like to point out that the Greenwich Village, which I love, is also one of the most exclusionary neighborhoods in New York City, if not the country. This is an enormously desirable place to live, and we are all incredibly lucky to live here. The reason that it is so expensive to live in is simply because so many people want to live here, and because there are so few homes. That shortage of housing is not an accident. It's the product of decades of meetings in which we have voted to block housing. This is an opportunity to change that. When we ask why all of our housing gets more expensive just a few years after being built, that's absolutely the housing shortage at work. If we were building enough housing, we could have new housing and it would get less expensive over time. The fact that every kind of housing constantly gets more expensive is a product of the fact that people want to live here and we're not creating any new homes for them to live in. I know there's a lot of concern about high rents and luxury housing, and I absolutely share those concerns. We should not live in a luxury city or a luxury neighborhood where only the few can live. When we fail to build housing, that's the neighborhood that we're creating. And that's the city that we're creating. So the City of Yes that we have before us is an opportunity for us to begin to make a bit of a difference and to rectify some of those planning mistakes in the past. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
If you care to.
Sorry,
email your-
I just got called hate speech. I believe.
Arlene doesn't like. Okay, you know what?
I don't think hate
No,
speech.
no,
is-
okay, Andrew, no. We have to treat everyone with respect, and Carter, can you move the chat so we can't see something? John
Yes.
DeVerna, sorry.
Sorry.
John, you have-
Other John, I guess there's a lot of us here today. I appreciate some of the sentiment shared by here tonight. I guess my thought is it's maybe a little, and don't take it wrong, about like how some people are looking at the roommate adjustments. It doesn't seem like this, and maybe correct me where I'm wrong here, John, that or DCP John. It's not just 4 people in a bedroom or a bathroom, and people that you've got a chance to meet and make sure you're comfortable being around. And if there's a problem, not having to go through housing court, but maybe being able to have them removed for with the conversation or just going your separate ways. This is going to be people have completely independent lease. I've done criminal court. I've seen a lot of neighbor disputes. Imagine they're not across the fence, but in the same kitchen as you every day or sharing a bathroom with you. I think it invites a lot of problems. So my question build up, number one, is that a limit to the number of bedrooms per bathroom or per utilities or facilities that you talked about earlier? Is that contemplated, a limit? So there's at least a better proportion?
No, I agree completely. If we want to formalize it, then we have to think about certain types of management difficulties that arise with that form of housing. And, we have an interagency task force on it led by HPD. And we absolutely are considering things like how many bedrooms per bathroom, how many bedrooms per refrigerator, what management best practices can we look to in other jurisdictions that have legalized this? So you're correct. I don't want to claim that every roommate situation is akin to shared housing, because sometimes it's like 3 friends from school or, family members or whatever. So you're correct that not every rooming situation is like this. And we definitely have our eye on those types of issues. And we'll have more to share during the public review process.
Okay, so they are contemplating a cap. They just haven't worked it out yet?
Yeah, I mean, those will go along. Those aren't things that will go in the zoning. Those are things that will go in the housing maintenance code. And so if and when we propose the changes to the housing maintenance code that will go through city council, that will contain all that type of detail.
And then I'm just hearing how the setup would be: 1 landlord, 10 rooms, with the right to lease for a month at a time or maybe less. I mean, that's an Airbnb bonanza, no? And so I wonder if in the YCP, in this proposal, has your committee been in discussions with short-term companies, specifically
Oh,
Airbnb. and
yeah,
Booking.
no, so every type of housing that we've been talking about today is for permanent occupancy. That is 30 days or more. We would not be enabling any new transient occupancy stuff at all, 30 days or less. Those aren't residential uses, and so they're not included in this proposal.
But if you do a 30-day lease, right, that would be completely fine. And so
yeah, under state law, you could do a 30-day
have
lease.
10 units in there, shared bathroom, rent them out just 30 days, and there'd be a rotating cast of people coming in to a building, or maybe a portion of a building, and the permanent residents or more stable down there, they would be affected by this as well, right?
Yeah, that would be legal 30 days or more under state law. And so, that's legal today too. If you want to Airbnb for 30 days or more, then you're complying with state law and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Well, don't you have to be on premises for that? So I'd have to live there in order to sublet out certain.
No, that's for less than 30 days. If you want to have Airbnb folks for less than 30 days, you have to be present in the unit. But if you're a landlord who wants to rent out an apartment 30 days at a time, you're allowed to do that under state law because that's permanent occupancy.
Thank you for the clarification on the Airbnb. Yep. You are correct on that. I guess my concern just goes back to the roommates part and the number of bathrooms. I think that's my concern with this, but obviously we all support the idea of improving and streamlining. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, hi, Chris. Wait. Yeah, and we won't mute it on.
That's great. So one of the major issues that obviously popped up a lot was the word luxury, and how it's defined as sort of this ephemeral thing that really just boils down to developers will always call something that is new luxury because it is new. I went to a fire last night in a building that's about 100 years old. And at the time it was new. Now it's not. It's sort of decrepit, but at the same time, the construction was immaculate. It is nothing but poured concrete, steel structures, elevators. It's a beautiful building. And then what's being built today and is being called luxury anyway is C-joists and drywall. Like the comparison between what you're actually being promised and what you're getting is sort of nonsensical, because elevators are over 100 years old. Maybe the newest thing inside of a building that would promote the concept of luxury is maybe the thing virtual doorman. Like doormen are not a new concept, stairs are not a new concept, rooms are not a new concept, having your own bathroom is not a new concept. So what happens all the time is there's this conflation between luxury and new, and there is no regulation for it. And so I think the only proposition that we're having here is, because we need housing, and what is always being built is always built as luxury housing, despite how what might be luxury is, like, we could put a new chandelier in this room and all of a sudden call it luxury. There is no regulation on what luxury means. And so there is this confusion for me about what do we actually do? And I think if this is the only thing that we can do, then I think my question is perhaps, can you just do more of it? Thanks.
I just have a question for you, Chris. What's affordable housing? Because that's what we're talking about.
That's a separate thing. That is.
No, but that's what City of Yes is about.
In 1999, guaranteed.
But that's what City of Yes is about.
Between after 1999 rates, you can't build anything that's already been established. So what
But the City of Yes is about adding affordable housing.
Yeah, and I can always stop when I'm answering your question. So he's proposing that you increase FAR by adding this.
FAR.
Yes, exactly. So there is this. I think my question that is truly, is there a way to guarantee that we have more UAP, more FAR, more things that guarantee that as the city cannot regulate what developers build, is there a way that we can continue to build more things that the city actually needs?
I just go back to the affordability part, which is what the bump is supposed to be.
I can't make his question for you, like.
I'm just saying that it's the affordability is what City of Yes is trying to add by incrementally adding in.
It would be great to add it, not just incrementally, but also just substantially, sure. I think we're on the same page here.
I think you called it about luxury and not the affordable
market rate now.
Yeah, because when we build buildings, we have to build luxury buildings because the city can only build so much affordable housing.
It's Darlene, it's Chris Dignas who is in the board.
Does it fair?
Eugene, do you think we're ready to move into business?
Are there any questions from the public? For a hand? No?
Yes.
Any other questions from committee members or CB2 members? No? Okay. We can move into this.
I think so.
I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I just want to refocus on just the baseline housing shortage that we have in the city, 1.41 net rental vacancy rate, the worst since 1968, which is not an abstract thing. It really does have that full range of human consequences from high rents to street homelessness. And we think that this is the best way to create a lot of additional housing while respecting people's legitimate concerns about neighborhood change. And so we really hope that you will come around. There's so many smart people on this community board, and I've really enjoyed the discussion tonight. I really hope that we can keep talking to you and come around to a place where you can support these initiatives, which again, are not just in Community District 2, but in the other 58 across the city as well, as part of a shared effort to address probably the most serious problems that the city faces today. So thanks a ton.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Could we confirm one thing just before you guys go? It was referred today, right? It was referred out to community boards. So,
yeah, that's right. Today is when the clock starts.
okay, so we start the 60-day clock. Although it's a non-ULURP action,
right.
our response is due, what is it, July 8th?
Well, you can submit your feedback up to the City Planning Commission vote, which is on Chelsea's timeline, probably won't be till early September. So, you know, it's great. We're happy to accept your feedback whenever you can get it in, but we are absolutely open to feedback until the last possible moment if, you know, it involves more discussion by the community board.
Okay, all right, thank you. And just to announce our next several meetings.
Are they coming back?
Yeah, so our next several meetings that we have scheduled. What is the, you have the
15th and the 20th.
May 15th.
May 15th.
Yeah, next week.
May 15th, we are meeting again. May 15th, we'll be joined by George James, city planner, not the urban planner that we'll be working with to help CB2 with the response. And then May 29th, we'll be meeting once again. I think that's a tentative for now. We'll confirm that later on, but Chelsea and John, we're inviting DCP back for the May 29th meeting if we have the need for that additional meeting. If we have additional questions that, you know, that benefits the discussion. What we said that we would do is we would help compile all the questions that come up from the committee and from CB2, and then send those back and forth to DCP as we're going through the process. DCP has said that they'll be able to respond to these questions kind of on a rolling basis, but we'll see if we need the additional meeting, but we have that penciled in for May 29th.
Yep, Mark told me about that meeting, so I let him know I can make myself available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are those meetings also public forums for public comment or just business sessions?
You took as long as you want to.
They will be, I mean, there'll be land use meetings.
Or informational.
Yeah. I mean,
This is our public hearing on this though. So the public hearing's done.
Yeah, are you asking if you can come?
Anybody?
No, I know I can come. I'm asking if other people from the public who aren't on the board can come to offer their feedback on this.
It's not any more commentary from the public. Unless the committee chair would want to, because this is the public hearing on the. So in the past, what we've done is done it all in one meeting. And now we've broken it in two parts, because imagine now trying to formulate the board's response after going through all this a little too much. So we do the public hearing in one meeting and then the working sessions one or two afterwards, because it's difficult to do all that. And
makes perfect sense. Just wanted to clarify.
And then we anticipate having a regular land use meeting in June.
Work on the resolution.
Work on the resolution and then bring it to the board. We're hoping in June we'll be
June
ready.
full board.
Yeah, June full board. I mean, although we've heard from John that we might have some leeway on that, but these extra meetings, I think, will help us be more timely. That's the goal anyway. And we've all learned from dealing with, this is our third city of yes, we've all learned that it's quite an intensive, it needs a lot of intensive attention on our. Is there one hand up, Carter? I don't know what that is.
Looks like Pete's got his hand up.
Yeah, if Mr. Mangan mentioned 10, 15 years down the line, I'm hoping that DCP can provide to us the maximum number of residential occupants projected by the city for the island of Manhattan in the next 10, 20, 30 years that this seems to be trying to address.
Well, Pete, fortunately or unfortunately, Manhattan will never, ever see its peak population of over 2 million of about 100 years ago. So we're about 1 million below where we were in 1910. We do not project that we'll get anywhere near that in the future, for better or for worse.
Is there a target number that this program is aiming towards?
We project up to about 110,000 units over the no action condition over the next 15 years. I think I mentioned the number. It may seem underwhelming to folks, but that's about 1 unit per acre over 15 years. So like I said, it's not, from the perspective of any one place, it's not too dramatic, but when you really go citywide, you can actually create a ton of housing without anybody noticing. And that's what we're hoping to do with this.
They understood, and is that part of an?
Okay, Pete, I think, thank you for your questions, but I think it's time the committee is.
I just said, Bob Dillon's first apartment, 161 West 4th Street. I'm not sure which unit he lived in. The rents are 5,800, 8,500, 4,700, and 7,600.
We done.
And the building is not changed. It is still the same C of O, same thing.
Yeah.
That's what a housing shortage will do to you, folks.
That is passport. Jones Street, where the famous record property.
That's just from Street Easy, so.
That's right, positively Fourth Street. Okay, thank you. Thank you to the Department of City Planning.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to let you all know I was keeping track of your questions, so I'll follow up via email because I know there were some unresolved things. So
thank you so much, Chelsea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you to members of the public who attended. Thank you to the many members of the community board who do not sit on this committee for coming to help us grapple with this big project. So appreciate that. I appreciate that. I know Eugene does as well. Unless there's anything further, we'll see you in. Wait. Are we? Oh, no, well, we want to do new business and business session.
Yeah, so are we in business session?
Yes, we are in business session. Is there anything?
Do we have new business? I thought someone had.
Well, I had written to you about, we're skipping business session and we're going to new business.
Well, we're reconvening on the,
Okay, so I think everybody's aware that Related is proposing a casino for the western part of Hudson Yards. And they've come out with their plan. They are taking 5,700. This is sorry that John Manchin has left. Their original plan was 5,700 units of housing, 20% of it affordable. In 6 buildings, they're boiling it down to 3 buildings, 2 of which are commercial, 1 of which will be taller than the edge. And they've taken the 5,700 units and boiled it down to 1,500. I think that this is going, if you look at the plans, it's just going to be an enormous building for the casino. It's going to be a 1,750 room hotel on a 20 story base. And I believe that if we really, to do the responsible thing, we should have them come and present to us. Because the backwash of this project is going to affect us, is going to affect the High Line in a very big way. And I think we should hear it from their mouths so that we know what we want to do about it.
Yeah, but first of all, it's only proposed. There are many other proposals on the table for the casino. Certainly not a done deal. Eight other
Well, do you want to wait until it's been chosen?
Would have been why here in CB2? I don't know why would they entertain it?
Frederick, I would.
Want to go all over the city.
Frederick, what action would they?
Opining on what's.
What did you say?
Here, so I would be very upset if some other board jumped the gun on a project.
We were upset when they did that with the.
It's not, this is affecting the High Line, which is in our district.
For
Okay,
blocks.
well, it's also affecting, yes, but that's where the headquarters is. It's going to attract an enormous number of people. We are also a tourist destination. So I don't see how I don't see what the point is in turning our back on this.
Frederick, a question, what action would be required? Is it a special permit? For the use?
This is
Removed all the.
this is the very preliminary.
Casino.
The state has changed the rules so that this is now zoned for casino.
The whole city.
Okay? But it will ultimately, I believe, be a ULURP action.
So I have a question, what would it be proactively doing something? How is that going to be different than being reactive in this situation? Because generally land use actions, we are reactive to, not proactive to, and it just seems that because as David said, there's so many sites under consideration, it sounds like just roughly from what you're saying is that you're interested in how do you mitigate impacts.
Well, the other casino sites don't impact our district in the same way.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, but it's like the mitigation is something that happens when
Their plan at this point is not finalized, right? If we had comments on their plan, we can't make it if we haven't seen it. I don't understand why we wouldn't have them come and then decide what we want to do about it. They're willing to go anywhere. In fact, I think they've perhaps have already asked to come here. Okay. Right. Did Susan say that? Susan Kent? Anyway, I don't think we need permission from somebody to have them, and it's going to affect us.
Yeah.
I would think it disrupts our review things like this with the city of Yes.
Well, then let's schedule it for July.
Yeah, I think we should ask Mark Levine. Let's ask him.
Why would we ask Mark Levine?
Because he's the borough president of Manhattan. They're in Manhattan. We're in Manhattan. You're worried about impact in our neighborhood. Maybe he's worried about impact in districts on Community Board 4, other
Community Board 4. Perhaps I'll send out the letter that Community 4 did. It's a total blast of the proposal. We just spent 3 hours discussing housing, and now we're hearing that instead of 5,700 units, they're going to do 1,500 units. Do we care about that?
Well, I think it totally goes along with what we were saying about, the unforeseen consequences of these zoning changes where we are expecting a lot of housing and it doesn't happen. But I think Community Board 4 should approach us for help because I feel we shouldn't be encroaching on them.
We're not encroaching.
Say something. I mean, we generally do not. I've never heard us intervening in another community board's applications.
The High Line is one of our stakeholders and constituents. The High Line offers.
I was just going to say, before you decide what route to take, maybe just hearing from CB4, what they think what role they might think they would like us to play, if any, what they would like to share from us. I mean, maybe we should just be informed on this by them.
That's a good idea.
That's
okay. Fine.
I don't want to do it. I don't want to have them here.
No, I don't either.
Okay, well, Susan, Eugene and I will talk.
You certainly can turn them down, but if you think there's something here that deserves further inspection, at least get it from the horse's mouth. That's all.
Well, I mean, this is related, did approach us, I think, to try and talk to us about it. We turned them down.
That's what I thought I had heard. And I'm suggesting.
Because it wasn't.
CB4
I know, because we didn't really know what it was gonna look like.
One meeting, we want to say something.
I'm serious, we already get the borough president's opinion about this. I think,
But why care what Mark thinks?
but why not? He's in charge of the whole thing.
He's gonna say no.
I think that's a very logical start. So thank you.
I do want to report on 110 Christopher Street that, the dressmaker, art gallery, music store situation. Well, the landlord and the attorney for 110 Christopher Street sent us an amendment, I guess you would say. And what they have done is they've done rat mitigation, because that was something for the building residents. They have upgraded some lighting, and they have a new agreement and signed affidavit with the art gallery owner, restricting the hours to Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. I think closed on Sunday, never at night. There was a picture of no smoking signs posted in the basement, and no drinking, which was another problem. So they're going forward to the BSA with our objections and our recommendation not to approve, and with this new set of actions that the landlord has taken in response to what the community shared with us. And so it looks very positive. I think we did our job.
Good.
I'm surprised. I think that we were purposeful and correct, and they didn't notice. So good work.
The gallery agreed.
Well, we'll see if she holds to it. Yeah. Okay, anything else, Eugene?
388 Hudson, we did meet with Tyler from HPD about the community visioning report. We took to them the concerns about the survey and the results that were in the report that we talked about last time. We asked if they would take a letter from us or a resolution. They did get back to us. They said they wouldn't, because
It would not.
they would not. It's not. They just basically cited that they have not done it projects. They are going to refer to the resolutions that we already put out regarding 380 Hudson. So those are already referenced, will be referenced in the RFP. So they feel like that's sufficient. But that
What about
was
the mistake that we thought they had made in the type of window that was the preference?
So
they said it was floor to ceiling glass.
Yes.
We said something else.
Yeah, so they said, I'm trying to remember the question. So there were like 4 window types, and they pointed out that the respondents overwhelmingly picked, I think, the
punch windows,
windows as well as the floor to ceiling windows, right?
Yeah.
I think that was kind of borne out by the.
There wasn't much interest in the floor in the curtain wall.
Right, there was like three marks on the.
Those 3, I think those were the 2 of the.
I think it's up to the agency to say that we can't. So.
No, we can do another reso. The question was, if we submit a letter, will they allow the letter, will they bundle the letter?
Yeah, we wanted it
with the
attached.
RFP.
And they would.
But we ought to go on record. But that the survey that they did was biased. It didn't really address, I mean, I can make a survey that would change the entire results. Surveys are like.
So the option then is we could do a resolution. I mean, we could either do a resolution or a letter.
I don't care what APD says. We want to go on record. It's saying this is how we feel about done and, biased.
It just.
Whatever we want to say, and I don't think that the agency should say that they won't bundle it or will or not. We need, as a community board, to go on record and say how we feel about something.
That's fine, but it won't go in the RFP. Just so that you know.
please try and find the survey, and I will do the same and look at it, at the distribution of dots, and you'll see, yeah.
Yeah, this is what Tyler said in response to the question about the windows. That they were trying to show the point of view that they had heard. They didn't hear what we thought.
I don't think, to what Frederica said, we don't have to go back and look. I think that the dots that they showed us were not on those larger windows. My
We
recollection was they
commented on
weren't.
it at the time.
Right, but I mean, and they also said the surveys, I remember that as being something that our comments were in alignment, as unlike some of the other things with what was in there.
Yeah, it was very, we knew that.
The survey didn't say whether we should have a recreation center.
It didn't call it a recreation center, it called it a community space.
On that point.
Let me finish, okay? So I thought that, you could design a survey, you design anything you want, and you could tilt it any. They said, well, no one responded that they wanted a recreation center. It's all stupid thing was on there. So, and then if you do recall, I asked them if this was a special survey. They said, no, this is the standard survey they do, if you recall. And I said, if you pulled it out of the drawer, out of the file. He said, well, we don't customize surveys, if you recall. And so I thought we're just being led around by the process of this. And I would certainly do some kind of reso, do what you want to read. But I think CB2 should and must have a decision on this. And whether they want to include it, not include it, we need a position. Because, I could see where, it could be a very controversial thing. And they're going to turn to the community and say, you feel about it? You say, this is the resident that wrote. Doesn't want to include it in the RFP.
Okay. And one point about going back to what we heard tonight, I think it would be really nice to invite Eric Botcher to one of our meetings to hear where he stands on this housing opportunity.
Going across border lines, you're gonna create a lot of bad feeling.
Yeah, so we're talking about.
I'm talking about City of Yes.
City of Yes.
Yeah. Okay, just going back to that before we. Well, let's hear. He's gonna have the final vote.
Typically, I mean, just in this, it rolls up, that they're interested in our perspective as a board, take that and take.
Yeah, but let's hear his perspective. It might influence our perspective.
Wait, I just want to be clear. You're talking about City of Yes.
Yes. No, City of Yes, sorry. I did jump.
Just bounce back to.
Did jump.
We're gonna go back.
Want to go back?
Well, I don't know. No, I want to at some point. Finish up 388 and then.
So for 388, if the committee feels, and it sounds like there's like a strong feeling that we should do a resolution. A resolution is going to be stronger than the letter.
We need to plan out.
Then, yeah, another meeting this month, so we could have it as another topic. If we want to timing wise try and do it this month, or we could do it in June.
Did you have a sense of when their RFP was going to be distributed?
I have to check
It
my
takes a
notes.
while. It's not
Yeah.
as fast as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, how much time do you think this will take? I think
It should be pretty short.
No, but that's right. That's what I'm just saying. My other point was just, can we block our time out efficiently so that we don't get stuck at the end dealing with City of Yes and other things.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So like, I don't want to run out of time on City of Yes.
Right.
So let me check to see when the RFP is supposed to be issued. And if we have the opportunity to do it either this month or next month or 388, or if we have some more leeway.
So maybe I can start drafting it in the next couple of days.
So are we gonna give George any direction before our next meeting about what we want to focus on?
We should.
Yeah.
We should.
Do we want to focus? Do we want to focus on everything, which we kind of wound up doing with economic opportunity? Or given the size of this, could we just skip the things that we're in favor of and focus on the things that we think are problematic for CB2?
We have an idea of.
Well, he should have, but I'm saying we should just encourage him not to inundate us with everything.
So I think when he was here, he did last. We gave him a little bit of direction, but the biggest question for the last City of Yes component in this is what is relevant to our board.
Right, yes.
And that's really, and you know, the proposals online on our website, and they missed a crucial area, which they were going to proactively bring up to us, which was the SLID.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have to understand where these areas are, because we have, and this is, the whole point is, you can't control anybody, but how do you promote building of housing? And that's what I'm curious about, and what where there's realistically, will there be development? How do we get development of housing? It seems that the answer to that question actually is more zoning, not the City of Yes. This is just a little incentives, and we are the anomaly, which is unfortunate. And even though John mentioned was addressing that, speaking of the city, we're always the outlier. The thing is, we don't have enough housing production because people go and take the money, and how do I get the most money? I mean, the idea that portable SROs are going to be built in CB2 is probably not what most people would do, unless there's some really small parcel of land where that fits the building typology. But that's probably not where they're going to get the money. It's going to be decades and decades away before there's a reduction in what market rate rents will.
But you know, Manchin.
So, but what we need is the building.
Right,
And
but
not
Manchin was very
office
clear
buildings, so
about, to his credit, because I've had a lot of arguments with him, but he said zoning is not the mechanism by which you provide additional housing. He said that over and over again. And I mean, on the edges, you can encourage and you can discourage certain kinds of development, but the mechanism for creating housing is not zoning. It just isn't. He said that. And he's the person, he's a holdover from de Blasio. They had a lot of lofty ideals when they came in about what they wanted to do and how they were going to create housing in the city. And he, out of his mouth, he's been saying that now. You know, he looks at everything, that figure I thought was very compelling when he talks about the amount of development per acre.
Yeah,
And how it all is like regression to the mean, you know, so therefore you guys who are very interested in creating, you know, I think you all think that the community board has been over the years a tremendous influence in promoting unfair opportunity and status quo and not allowing for more housing. You hear it from the mouth of this guy's the head of zoning for the DCP. He said it's not, the problem is not the zoning. It just isn't. So, you know, we can try to help in ways that we can, but we can't do too much, you know. We see that, or those of us on the landmarks committee, you see that all the time. There's always somebody coming who wants to convert a 6-family to a 1-family.
Or two.
Can't do anything.
you're throwing around a lot of different things, Bo, and one of the problems that we have is that zoning, we saw this, was it 6 years ago, 5 years ago, in late 2019, the Municipal Art Society presented to us.
Yes.
A tale of two rezoning.
Right.
And those two areas were downtown Brooklyn and Long Island City. In both areas, the result of the city's rezonings did not produce what the city wanted.
Right.
What for us, we're seeing that, and Andy Cantu, talked about, Hudson Square, which is the area where we can have maximum housing development here, and those buildings, and the zoning thumb is not on the scale for housing. And the biggest property owner there, they themselves on one of their properties are going to develop, they switched from housing to an office building. And so that's why I asked the question, how does City of Yes impact that? Exactly. And that's sort of my point of what I would like to hear.
Because we don't have affordable housing, any housing in Hudson Square. See, what housing? But under the commercial development.
I understand, but the point that
the idea is that
City of Yes,
it's not incentivized, certainly affordable housing.
but hold on a second. The question of the City of Yes is adding on extra housing. It's not necessarily going to change what happens here, but we saw a great example is in Little Italy. right? This A district, which I don't know if people are familiar with, the special little zoning district. That's another area where our zoning doesn't match what's across the street on the other side of Bowery, but it's divided into 3 areas, A, B, and C. The A area is where we've seen some new development. There are underdeveloped properties there. There are areas that are empty that make sense, that are probably going to be developed in the short term. And so to get housing, what we've seen is luxury buildings, and when we say luxury, and this is a very good point, these are multi-million-dollar apartments, not $1-million 1-bedrooms. These are larger units. But how do we get more housing there? And that's what I'm curious to ask George, is what we'll get that would change the metric that you have.
It's
more reasonable housing.
Our community, the city of Yes is no help whatsoever.
Not what?
It's no help whatsoever.
Well, it's gonna add additional units. The question becomes, will people choose to
buy it or not?
Accept it? And that's what Andy Cantu said, they chose not to. Right?
No, but there's
in areas, they chose not to take the extra development area. Instead, they developed.
Whatever. They have a trickle down theory. They build more housing, it won't be soul crushing, I think is the word that he said. Because there'll be so much supply, housing rates will go down. I don't see it, and the 18
small areas, David, and that's what I want to hear.
We're talking about CB2.
Yeah, no, but in CB2, we have a lot of small areas where there's going to be something, but they're all smaller. They're not this massive addition. But how is this? This is what that's supposed to help. Those match more of the conditions of the other boroughs. So these smaller areas, how can we get something a little bit more? And I'd be curious to hear from George, how is this going to help with that so we can focus on those areas?
So, but we get a small,
we
get a smaller footprint and with an 18 FAR. So what's that doing?
But that's not going to be the case of an 18 FAR.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd just like to hear from George.
But your building went from 9 apartments to 1 apartment. It didn't come to us. No, I know, and that is a very important point.
Time
And
out.
Stephen A. Cohen
Time out.
built his mansion.
Eugene wants to say something, we can close out the meeting.
Wanted to raise, R72. We're not
Have to
72
do the
community.
fair.
No, wasn't that the 18 FAR in R72?
Well, I want to get an idea of when we talk to George, what areas we should have him focus on when he comes. I mean,
He should tell us.
he
He should tell us. Our reso for economic opportunities started out very focused. And in the end, we wound up commenting on almost everything.
Everything.
And that was, we don't have to do that again. It doesn't serve anyone for us to spread ourselves around. So tell them, we're looking for a targeted, we've heard so many things, just focus the things that you think are really going to impact us, whether conscious or cumulative.
So we have a handful of special zoning districts, so that covered a little bit. We'd like more depth, right?
Right.
Right. So those then, and on top of that, we only have a couple of other zoning districts, right, that are of any substantive size that are left from that.
We think
And
campus-
so,
we think campus is going to matter.
I mean, this has to be.
The changes in the adaptive reuse regulations, right?
We aren't done.
That's another thing. What about the
I'll call you later.
impact of the air rights over a wider area? Will the density increase in historic districts? But that's, I'm not asking you to answer. I'm just saying that's.
I mean, that's a big deal for us, the impact on historic.
So as far as data
Yeah,
that
you
you
tell us.
collected, the individual landmark.
That FA, but that extra air rights.
Yeah.
Where do
We
they-
don't have an individual landmark. We don't have to.
And let them tell us then.
Not a whole lot. I looked at But
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that we have any in Soho, we've merchants.
Specific, there's a couple of specific buildings, it's like the really pretty buildings.
Are individual, yeah.
There are.
Like. Very little.
Higher, it's a little higher.
Okay.
But there are.
Doesn't have any air rights to give away, so that's.
Right, but no, but that's just a good question to understand that, because we know that's gonna come up, so we should be asking towards that. And then if you look at the Zap, like, or not Zap, if you look, I think, hold on, when given, you don't have that many to,
Okay.
a couple of big tracks of. Zoning types and just understanding.
And Eugene.
And I don't think it's much more.
Okay, I think the meeting is adjourned.
Between, in Worcester on the south.
Can't hear anything. Should we?
If they took like, they have vulnerability if they all kind of.
That was fine, that's fine.
You know, it seems like one building won't, but it's the only block of.
Stella, can you hear anything or
Oh, that has like,
you can? Okay.
Well, it's hard when everyone's talking. So like at this point, I can't really hear everything, but
Okay.
throughout the
Okay.
meeting, I've been able
But
to
I
hear.
think, okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Meeting, okay.
we're gonna adjourn.
Yeah.
Meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
We don't have any.
Individual